Hey guys, today we're pulling on our metaphorical waders and sloshing into the murky, ancient waterways of Australia, where the morning mist still clings to the eucalyptus leaves, and the air hums with the promise of something utterly unexpected. Imagine yourself there, boots sinking slightly into the soft, damp earth beside a slow-moving river, the faint scent of wet leaves and something wild, primal tickling your nose. You're listening. For what, you ask? For a ripple on the surface, a rustle in the reeds, the subtle sign of an animal so profoundly bizarre, so utterly out of place in the neat categories of life, that when Europeans first encountered it, they genuinely thought it was a prank. And here's your cheeky reality check. If you were a small, territorial creature challenging this particular marvel of evolution, you probably wouldn't survive this encounter. We're about to dive deep into the enduring medical mystery of something truly astonishing. A creature that seems to have borrowed its parts from a committee meeting where no one could agree, and then decided to add a secret weapon just for kicks. The platypus. You find yourself peering into the shadowed waters, feeling that familiar sense of wonder mixed with a touch of, well, confusion. Because when you finally spot it, sleek and dark against the glinting water, you're not entirely sure what you're looking at. It's a mammal, yes, but it lays eggs. It nurses its young, but doesn't have nipples. Instead, the milk simply oozes from pores on its belly, like a biological sweat. It has a bill, flat and rubbery like a duck's, perfectly adapted for foraging in the silty riverbed. Its feet are webbed, ideal for propelling its torpedo-shaped body through the water, yet they retract for terrestrial digging, revealing sharp claws. And its tail, broad and flat, resembles that of a beaver, used for storing fat and for steering. It's an evolutionary mashup, a biological Frankenstein's monster, if Frankenstein had been a genius of playful genetic recombination rather than grim reanimation. You almost expect it to quack like a duck, then snort like a pig, and then perhaps offer you a polite, yet slightly condescending, nod. It really makes you wonder if nature just sometimes throws darts at a whiteboard of animal parts and says, "Hey, let's see what sticks." This bewildering array of features wasn't just a curiosity for modern naturalists. It was a genuine scandal for the scientific community of the late 18th and early 19th centuries. When the first platypus pelt and sketch arrived in England in 1799, crammed into a box from the newly established colony of New South Wales, the esteemed zoologist George Shaw was convinced it was an elaborate hoax. He thought some mischievous colonial taxidermist had stitched a duck's bill onto the body of an otter-like mammal, a sort of biological equivalent of a Photoshop prank gone wild. He even took scissors to the pelt, searching for stitch marks, determined to expose the fraud. This mainstream historical fact highlights just how utterly unprecedented the platypus was. It defied all existing classifications and expectations. Imagine the utter disbelief, the polite but firm accusations of trickery, circulating through the stuffy parlors of London's scientific societies. They were, in essence, trying to fit a square platypus into the round hole of their established Linnean taxonomy, and it just wasn't going to happen. Beyond its physical appearance, the platypus possesses a quirky or fringe tidbit that further cements its status as nature's eccentric genius: its electrosensory system. You see, while it forages underwater with its eyes, ears, and nostrils all sealed shut, it's not relying on touch or smell in the traditional sense. Instead, its sensitive bill, packed with thousands of electroreceptors and mechanoreceptors, can detect the faint electrical impulses generated by the muscle contractions of its prey, shrimp, insect larvae, worms. even in absolute darkness or murky water. It's like having built-in sonar, but for bioelectricity. Imagine navigating your own world not just by sight and sound, but by feeling the subtle hum of every living thing around you. It's a superpower straight out of a comic book, except instead of fighting crime, this hero uses it to find snacks at the bottom of a river. And yet, for all its oddities and unique adaptations, one feature stands out, casting a long, perplexing shadow over its already mysterious existence. The venom, you might be thinking, venom? But it's a mammal. And that, my friend, is where the plot thickens, or rather, where the river currents become truly opaque. Male platypuses possess a spur on each hind ankle, a sharp, hollow bone connected to a venom gland in their thigh. This isn't just a simple scratch. This is a highly potent cocktail of compounds, delivered with a precision that belies the platypus's otherwise cuddly appearance. While not lethal to humans, the pain it inflicts is notoriously excruciating, described as immediate, agonizing, and often debilitating, lasting for days or even weeks. It causes swelling, extreme tenderness, and can even induce temporary paralysis of the affected limb. Historically, the purpose of this venom has been a subject of intense debate. While some early theories suggested it was for defense against predators, historians and biologists still argue whether its primary function truly extends beyond male-on-male combat during breeding season, a sort of chemically enhanced territorial dispute. You can almost picture them, two male platypuses squaring off, one thinking, "Oh, you want a piece of this riverbank, buddy? Well, meet my special ankle surprise." It's a remarkable adaptation, particularly rare among mammals, and it is this potent, puzzling secretion that has captivated scientists, leaving them scratching their heads, and sometimes their painfully swollen ankles, for centuries. The platypus, it turns out, is not just a strange blend of features. It's a living enigma, and its venom is perhaps the most enigmatic piece of its already baffling puzzle. You're still reeling, aren't you? That mix-and-match wonder, the platypus, waddling through your mind, a living puzzle. Now, picture yourself as a stuffy European scientist, late 18th century. Your world is neat, classified, ordered by the likes of Linnaeus. Every creature has its place, its known features. Then a package arrives. The crate, rough-hewn and smelling faintly of brine and preservative, is wrestled onto a worn laboratory bench. You pry open the lid, dust motes dancing in the meager light filtering through grimy windows. Inside, nestled amongst straw, lies it. A creature so utterly beyond your current understanding, your first gut reaction isn't awe. It's a scoff, a dismissive shake of the head. This, you think, is clearly some elaborate colonial jest. And honestly, considering the general state of science back then, a good prank could probably, quite literally, kill your career. Yes, you probably won't survive this, not your scientific reputation anyway, if you fall for such a ridiculous fabrication. You lean closer, your brow furrowed. It has fur, yes, like a beaver, but then a beak. A duck's beak. Glued on, sewn. You poke it gingerly at first, then with more force. The texture feels natural, too natural. But your mind, trained in the rigorous logic of nascent biology, screams fraud. You've heard tales, of course, of exotic mermaids crafted from monkeys and fish, or dragons assembled from various reptile parts. The very idea of an animal combining mammal fur, a bird's bill, and webbed feet seems like a cruel joke designed to embarrass the eminent naturalists of the Royal Society. This wasn't some gentle evolutionary experiment. It looked like the result of a drunken taxidermist's fever dream. You grab your sharpest scalpel. Your colleagues, initially amused by your indignant grumbling, now gather around, their expressions shifting from skepticism to a shared, bewildered fascination. They urge you on, dissect it, find the stitches, unmask the charlatan. And so you begin. You meticulously probe the edges where the bill meets the fur. You expect to find crude sutures, telltale glue, some clumsy artifice. But there's nothing. The attachment is seamless, organic, as if evolution itself had simply decided to have a bit of fun that day. The sheer, undeniable integration of these disparate parts is, frankly, infuriating. It's like discovering that your meticulously organized sock drawer actually contains a pair of sentient, self-laundering socks that also happen to glow in the dark and sing opera. Your entire understanding of hosiery, and indeed reality, is fundamentally shaken. It was the renowned British zoologist, George Shaw, who in 1799, upon first examining a specimen sent from New South Wales, famously declared his suspicion that it was a fake. He even attempted to remove the duck-like bill, convinced it had been artfully attached by ingenious Asian artisans. Imagine the frustration, the bewildered scratching of powdered wigs, as they encountered something so utterly defiant of their established classifications. This wasn't just a new species. It was a conceptual earthquake, rumbling through the very foundations of scientific thought and demanding a complete reevaluation of what constituted a natural creature. You can almost feel the collective headache radiating from the hallowed halls of academia. Historians still argue whether Shaw's initial skepticism was a genuine belief in a hoax or a strategic intellectual exercise, a necessary challenge to existing paradigms. Was he truly fooled, or was he playing the devil's advocate to ensure scientific rigor? Perhaps he'd been burned by one too many jackalopes in his time. You remember that story about the Fiji mermaid, don't you? The one P.T. Barnum exhibited, a grotesque concoction of a monkey's torso and a fish's tail. That was the kind of deception haunting the scientific minds of the era, making them wary of anything too outlandish from distant, exotic lands. The platypus, in its innocent naturalness, walked right into that cultural minefield of scientific pranks and tall tailies. Some fringe theorists even suggested it was evidence of a lost, unclassified order of chimeric creatures, bridging the gaps between known animal groups, a concept bordering on the fantastical for its time. They whispered of mythical beasts finally made real, of a world less ordered and more wondrously chaotic than they dared to admit. You can almost picture them, hunched over dusty tomes, trying to twist ancient legends to fit this bizarre new reality. The initial specimens, crude and preserved in alcohol, only deepened the mystery. Without living examples, without the context of their unique Australian habitat, the European mind struggled. Was it a mammal? It suckled its young, yet laid eggs. Was it a bird? The beak was undeniable, but the fur? No, that wouldn't do. The very act of categorizing this creature became a Herculean task, forcing naturalists to question the very foundations of their Linnean system. They tried to fit it into existing boxes, bending the rules, breaking them, until it became clear that the platypus wasn't just outside the box. It had perhaps built its own, entirely new box, then promptly buried it underground. Slowly, painstakingly, as more specimens arrived, as observations from Australia started to filter back, tales of its egg-laying, its unique venomous spur, its semi-aquatic lifestyle, the tide began to turn. The initial cries of hoax faded into murmurs of marvel. It took decades for the platypus to fully shed its image as a scientific curiosity bordering on deception and emerge as a legitimate, albeit utterly bizarre, member of the animal kingdom. The scientific community, forced to confront its own biases and preconceptions, had to grudgingly admit that nature, in its infinite creativity, was far stranger than their neatly organized textbooks allowed. You can almost hear the collective sigh of relief, mixed with a hint of exasperation, from those dusty old academies. They'd finally accepted the truth, but it was a truth that made them fundamentally rethink how they understood life itself. Imagine the academic papers on the utter indecency of Ornithorhynchus anatinus, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Duck-Billed Rodent. Well, maybe not quite that title, but the sentiment was there. It was a humbling experience for the grand minds of Europe, a reminder that the world was still full of wonders waiting to be genuinely discovered, not merely dissected and dismissed as some clever trick. And this strange, unassuming creature from the Antipodes, with its duck bill and beaver tail, had done what no other animal had managed. It had utterly baffled the Enlightenment. It sat there, an inconvenient truth, forcing them to expand their very definition of what was possible in the natural world. No mere hoax, it was a living, breathing paradigm shift, splashing its way into their rigid scientific constructs. You're leaning in, perhaps a little too close, as the platypus, that curious patchwork of nature's spare parts, dips and dives in the shimmering water before you. Its duck-like bill sifts through the murky depths, those tiny eyes barely visible, and its webbed feet propel it with an effortless grace that belies its awkward terrestrial waddle. You're captivated, tracing its movements, wondering how something so utterly improbable could even exist, let alone thrive. But then, as it pushes off a submerged log, a flicker of movement on its hind leg catches your eye. And just when you thought this creature couldn't get any stranger, a truly perplexing anatomical feature reveals itself. Nestled on the inside of each ankle, usually tucked away and unnoticed, is a sharp, bony protuberance. It's not just a claw, mind you, or some evolutionary leftover. This is a highly specialized structure, a dagger tucked away like a secret weapon. This is the fabled spur of the male platypus, and it is, quite literally, the business end of its venom delivery system. You might imagine a tiny, almost delicate spike, something easily dismissed. Oh, how delightfully wrong you'd be. Imagine instead a needle-sharp, slightly curved claw, rigid and capable of inflicting a surprisingly deep puncture wound. It's not something you'd want to accidentally step on, or, heaven forbid, be purposely jabbed by. If that happened, and let's be clear, it's not an experience you'd sign up for, you'd be introduced to a world of pain that would make a full-blown migraine feel like a gentle lullaby. You probably won't survive this encounter without a newfound respect for anything that can swim, waddle, and inject you with agony. Now, for centuries, the very existence of this spur, let alone its true function, remained a source of considerable confusion for those intrepid, often bewildered European naturalists. Early descriptions, often based on preserved specimens that had been poorly handled or even partially disassembled, sometimes missed the spur entirely or mistook it for a vestigial digit. There's a rather charming, if perhaps apocryphal, tale of a naturalist who, upon dissecting an early specimen, simply dismissed the spur as a malformation, a biological anomaly that couldn't possibly serve a practical purpose. After all, a mammal that lays eggs, has a duck bill, and sweats milk from patches of skin, and is venomous. That was simply too much strangeness for one creature to bear, surely. This mainstream historical fact highlights how much the platypus continued to confound even the most seasoned scientific minds. They were still grappling with the basics of its classification, let alone its more bizarre defense mechanisms. But the spur is far from vestigial. It's a highly sophisticated conduit. At the base of this ankle-mounted weapon lies a gland, the crural gland, which swells significantly during the breeding season. This is where the magic, or rather the mayhem, happens. The gland produces the venom, a complex cocktail of proteins, enzymes, and other compounds, which is then delivered through a duct that runs directly to the tip of the spur. Think of it like a hypodermic needle, but one that's grown naturally on an animal's ankle. When the male platypus feels threatened, or more commonly, when competing with another male for territory or a mate, he will attempt to spur his rival. It's a surprisingly efficient, if somewhat brutal, method of asserting dominance. What's truly fascinating, and adds another layer to this creature's already enigmatic reputation, is the venom's potency. It's not lethal to humans, thankfully. So perhaps that earlier reality check was a touch dramatic. But then again, how else do you get people to appreciate the true horror of a platypus sting? But it causes excruciating, debilitating pain that can last for weeks, sometimes even months. The pain is described as an intense, burning sensation, often accompanied by localized swelling, muscle atrophy, and a heightened sensitivity to touch that can persist long after the initial sting. You might find yourself unable to use the affected limb, a rather inconvenient outcome for something that looks as cuddly as a plush toy. It's like your body decides to throw a surprise party for your pain receptors, and you're the unwilling guest of honor. Now, here's a quirky tidbit for you. While the venom itself is generally considered non-lethal to humans, there's an old Aboriginal story that speaks of the platypus as a creature of great power and mystery, sometimes associated with water spirits. Some traditional accounts warned hunters to be exceedingly cautious, not just of its bite, which it doesn't do, not effectively anyway with that bill, but of the hidden, stinging power in its hind legs. This suggests an ancient, practical knowledge of the platypus's venomous nature, far predating European scientific discovery. It's a quiet testament to indigenous wisdom, a whispered caution against underestimating even the strangest creatures in the bush. And then there's the seasonal aspect. This isn't a venom gland that's constantly producing maximum output. Oh no, that would be far too straightforward for our platypus. The crural gland, and thus the venom's potency, reaches its peak during the breeding season, typically from late winter through spring. This strongly suggests that the venom primarily serves as a weapon in male-on-male combat for territory and mates. Imagine two male platypuses engaging in a furious underwater wrestling match, each trying to land a crippling blow with their spurs. It's less of a gentle frolic and more of a pugilistic ballet, albeit one performed by creatures that look like they're wearing fancy dress. Historians still argue whether the platypus's venom evolved as a secondary defense mechanism against predators, or if its primary, and perhaps only, evolutionary driver was this intense intraspecies rivalry. The fact that only males possess functional spurs, and that their venom production is tied to reproductive cycles, certainly strengthens the argument for male competition. It's an evolutionary riddle wrapped in an enigma, tucked neatly inside an ankle spur. You feel it, a searing, white-hot lance of agony shooting straight up your leg from the spur on your ankle, a pain so immediate and profound it steals the breath right from your lungs. It's not just a sharp sting, oh no. This is an all-encompassing, bone-deep ache that pulses with its own malevolent rhythm, spreading outwards from the point of impact like a slow-motion, liquid fire. Your muscles begin to cramp, hard knots forming beneath the skin, and a cold sweat breaks out on your brow, despite the sudden heat that engulfs your limb. This isn't just some everyday ouch. This is a full-body declaration that you've just had a very intimate, very unwelcome encounter with the platypus's secret weapon. And let's be honest, you probably won't survive this level of discomfort without a few existential questions. What you're experiencing, my friend, is a masterclass in biological warfare, delivered by a creature that looks like it was assembled from leftover parts. The platypus venom, you see, isn't some crude, one-note toxin. It's an intricate, carefully calibrated chemical cocktail, a symphony of destruction orchestrated by dozens, perhaps hundreds, of different peptides, proteins, and enzymes, each playing its own horrifying role. Imagine a tiny, biological supercomputer meticulously programming your pain receptors to scream at the top of their lungs. And you're getting close to understanding the intricate biological composition that's currently making you regret every life choice that led you here. At its heart, the venom is dominated by a family of peptides known as defensin-like peptides, or DLPs. Now, don't let the innocent-sounding defensin fool you. In most creatures, defensins are part of the innate immune system, busy defending the body against pathogens. But in the platypus, evolution has taken a sharp left turn, twisting these humble defenders into potent pain inducers. It's like finding out your polite, unassuming neighbor secretly moonlights as a heavy metal lead singer. These DLPs, particularly a specific one called platypus defensin-like peptide 3, or DLP3, are the primary architects of the excruciating pain you're now intimately acquainted with. They don't just irritate nerve endings, they fundamentally alter the way your pain signals are transmitted, essentially cranking the volume up to 11 and then breaking the knob off. But the platypus isn't content with mere agony. Oh no. Its venom also contains a host of other components designed to wreak havoc on your circulatory system. There are compounds that cause severe inflammation, leading to the rapid swelling that's now making your ankle look like a small, purple melon. Others are vasoactive, meaning they directly impact your blood vessels, causing them to constrict or dilate in chaotic ways, leading to drops in blood pressure and potentially disrupting blood flow. Some studies have even identified enzymes that can interfere with blood coagulation, though this effect seems to be more localized in humans than in smaller prey animals. It's less about stopping your blood cold, and more about making sure the delivery system for all that pain is working overtime. Now, early European scientists, bless their cotton socks, had a tough time wrapping their heads around this creature at all, let alone its unique venom. When the first platypus specimen reached England in 1799, it was famously dismissed as a hoax, a taxidermy Frankenstein's monster stitched together from different animals. So when tailies of its venomous spur started trickling back, often from Aboriginal accounts, you can imagine the skepticism. You mean this duck-billed, beaver-tailed, egg-laying mammal also has venom? They probably scoffed, pouring another gin and tonic. The scientific community, accustomed to venom being the sole preserve of snakes, spiders, and a few lizards, struggled to categorize this bizarre mammalian deviation. It wasn't until much later, with more detailed observations and eventually biochemical analysis, that the full truth of its potent chemical cocktail began to unfurl, often after some unfortunate individual or their dog had a rather painful learning experience. This historical fact, the profound initial disbelief in its venomous nature by Western science, highlights how challenging it was to fit the platypus into any pre-existing biological pigeonhole. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. Unlike many venoms that are primarily neurotoxic, attacking the nervous system or hematoxic, destroying blood cells, platypus venom is primarily known for its pain-inducing properties, which are disproportionately severe in humans and dogs compared to its actual lethality. It's almost as if evolution designed it less for killing and more for, well, making you really, really wish you were dead. It's like the universe's most effective "stay away from my territory" sign. One theory suggests that the venom's primary purpose might be male-on-male combat during breeding season, acting as a debilitating weapon to gain an advantage over rivals, rather than a predatory tool. If you've ever had a sibling rivalry, imagine if the worst thing they could do to you was inflict days of incapacitating pain. Now that's a deterrent. And speaking of purpose, historians still argue whether the platypus venom's unique composition points to a singular evolutionary path, or if it's a hodgepodge of adaptations. Some researchers lean towards the idea that it represents an ancient, perhaps ancestral, venom system in mammals, predating the more specialized venoms of snakes. Others argue that its specific array of peptides, particularly the defensin-like ones, points to a more recent, highly specialized evolutionary pathway, perhaps stemming from modified immune proteins. This ongoing debate just underscores how little we truly understand about the full breadth of the platypus's biological ingenuity. We know it hurts like Hades, but why it developed this specific blend of agony, and what its full biochemical repertoire truly entails, remains a tantalizing mystery that continues to challenge scientists. Your throbbing ankle, however, is a very clear and present testament to its efficacy. Platypus sting, unbearable pain you're wandering through the dense undergrowth by a cool, clear Australian creek, the air thick with the scent of eucalyptus and damp earth. A soft rustle in the reeds, a fleeting glimpse of a dark, furry form, and then a sudden, searing lance of agony erupts from your ankle. It feels as though someone has plunged a red-hot poker into your very bone marrow, twisting it with malicious intent. Your breath hitches, a sharp gasp tearing from your throat. This isn't your run-of-the-mill bee sting, oh no. This is the platypus, and its unique, utterly baffling venom has just decided to introduce itself to your nervous system. You collapse to the ground, a whimper escaping your lips. The pain isn't a fleeting thing. It's a living entity, clawing its way up your leg, throbbing with an intensity that seems to vibrate through your entire being. It's an all-consuming fire, escalating by the second. Your ankle, where the little guy's spur delivered its unsolicited chemical kiss, begins to swell. Rapidly. Not just a little puffiness, mind you, but an alarming ballooning that discolors the skin with an angry, bruised purple. You might think, oh, a little ice, a bit of elevation, and a good night's sleep will fix this, right? Oh, sweet summer child, you probably won't survive this level of discomfort without a healthy dose of existential dread. What makes this pain so uniquely dreadful? It's not just intense, it's persistent. We're talking hours, sometimes days, of excruciating agony. Unlike most venoms that might cause sharp, acute pain followed by a more manageable ache, platypus venom seems to flip a switch that keeps your pain receptors screaming at full volume, long after the initial insult. It's like your body is stuck in an endless loop of stubbing your toe on every piece of furniture in a very large, very dark room. You find yourself bargaining with the universe, offering up your firstborn, or perhaps just your last slice of pizza if only the relentless throbbing would just stop. Early European settlers, unaccustomed to such biological oddities, often dismissed accounts of platypus stings as exaggerated tailies. Surely, they might have scoffed over their tea, a creature so quaint could not inflict such suffering. Yet the first-hand experiences of trappers and naturalists quickly disabused them of this notion. A well-known incident in the late 19th century involved a gentleman named H.C. Forbes, who described his prolonged suffering after being spurred, detailing how the pain rendered him virtually incapacitated for days, defying conventional remedies. His account, one of the earliest widely documented, helped cement the platypus's reputation as more than just a cute, cuddly enigma. Historians still argue whether these early, vivid descriptions helped or hindered the scientific community's initial acceptance of the platypus's very existence, given the creature's already outlandish features. But here's the quirky tidbit that really throws a wrench in the medical works. Platypus venom pain is notoriously resistant to conventional analgesics. Morphine, pethidine. Even some of the stronger pain medications seem to shrug their shoulders and say, "Nope, not today, Chief." It's almost as if the venom has a secret handshake with your pain pathways, allowing it to bypass all the usual pharmacological bouncers at the door. Imagine trying to explain this to a doctor who's used to prescribing a few pills and sending you on your way. You're there, still writhing, while they stare at your chart, utterly flummoxed. "Are you sure you took the pills, sir? Perhaps a second dose?" You, through gritted teeth, might reply, "Doctor, I could snort an entire pharmacy and still feel like my leg is trying to escape my body." It's a medical mystery wrapped in an enigma, tied with a bow of sheer, unadulterated agony. The venom doesn't typically kill, which is a small comfort, but it can induce a profound and debilitating state that makes you wish it would just hurry up and get it over with. It causes hypersensitivity, where even a light touch to the affected limb can trigger waves of renewed pain. Your very nerve endings feel like they've been tuned to a heavy metal concert, volume maxed out, with no off switch. This isn't merely a localized injury. It's a systemic disruption. You might feel dizzy, nauseous, or even experience regional lymph node swelling, as your body valiantly, if ineffectually, tries to combat the chemical onslaught. It's a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous things come in the most unexpectedly adorable packages. You really have to give it to the platypus. It committed to the bit of being truly bizarre, from snout to spur. Scientists still grapple with the precise mechanism by which the platypus venom induces such recalcitrant pain. Is it a unique neurotoxin, an inflammatory agent on steroids, or perhaps a complex synergy of multiple peptides, each contributing a different, equally unpleasant note to the symphony of suffering? We remember how we touched upon its chemical cocktail earlier, those defensin-like peptides, the C-type natriuretic peptides. They're all there doing their part, but their combined effect on pain pathways remains a subject of intense research and, frankly, bewildered admiration. It's a pain profile so distinct, so frustratingly resilient, that it continues to challenge our understanding of analgesia and toxicology. You'd think by now, with all our fancy medical advancements, we'd have a simple antidote, a little poof, and the pain is gone. Alas, for the platypus sting, the best medical advice remains largely symptomatic, which basically means, here's some stuff that might make you a little less miserable while your body decides to eventually recover. You just have to ride it out, like a particularly gnarly wave. only this wave is made of pure, unadulterated hurt. You wade through the shallow, murky water of the creek, the cool current swirling around your ankles, oblivious to the small, unassuming creature that might be lurking just beneath the overhanging roots. Your hand brushes against a submerged log, and then zing. A sharp, searing lance shoots through your palm, radiating up your arm. It's not a splinter, not a nasty thorn, but something far more insidious. Your muscles involuntarily clench, a shockwave of pain, primal and immediate, seizing your entire being. This isn't just a sting. It's an introduction, a rather aggressive "how do you do?" from one of Australia's most peculiar residents. You remember that excruciating, long-lasting pain we discussed, how it clings to you like a particularly clingy ex. Well, you're living it now. Imagine trying to explain this level of agony to someone who's only ever stepped on a Lego brick in the dark. They just wouldn't get it. It's like trying to describe the color blue to someone who's only ever seen shades of beige. Utterly futile. This isn't a bee sting or even a wasp. This is a whole new level of ouch. The area around the puncture wound, typically on your hand or foot, begins to throb, a deep, bone-aching pulse that seems to echo your own startled heartbeat. The swelling begins almost immediately, turning your limb into something resembling an oversized, bruised balloon. You watch, horrified, as your fingers merge into a single, sausage-like entity, and the skin stretches taut, shiny, and exquisitely tender. The pain, rather than subsiding, deepens, morphing from a sharp jab into a constant, burning ache that radiates up your limb and, oddly, into your armpit or groin, depending on the site of the envenomation. While the pain, for you, feels like an express ticket to the underworld, a little reality check. You probably won't survive this specific moment without screaming, but you will, most likely, survive the actual envenomation itself. Unless, of course, you have a very rare, incredibly severe allergic reaction, in which case, well, good luck with that. But for the vast majority, it's just pure, unadulterated agony without the whole dying part. A small comfort, I know. The tales you've heard, whispered around campfires or exaggerated by mates down at the local pub, often paint the platypus as some kind of miniature, furry dragon. Its venom capable of melting bone or inducing instant paralysis. You might even have heard stories of people losing entire limbs to the swelling. And while the swelling is impressive, often turning your hand or foot into something resembling an oversized, bruised balloon, the truth is far less dramatic in its lethality, though no less intense in its suffering. The myths surrounding human encounters with platypus venom are numerous and often quite spectacular, probably because the pain is so out of proportion to the size of the animal or the perceived danger. It's almost as if your brain struggles to reconcile such immense discomfort with a creature that looks like a cuddly, aquatic patchwork quilt. Distinguishing fact from exaggeration requires a cool head, which, let's be honest, you won't have in the moments following a sting. Fact, the venom causes immediate, severe, and prolonged pain that can last for days, weeks, or even months, often remaining resistant to conventional painkillers. Fact, significant local swelling, sometimes extending up the limb, is common. Fact, while systemic effects like nausea, vomiting, dizziness, and general malaise can occur, they are generally not life-threatening. The most dangerous aspect, ironically, isn't the venom itself, but the potential for secondary infection in the puncture wound or the psychological toll of unrelenting pain. There have been reports, admittedly rare, of people experiencing a persistent hypersensitivity to the affected area for years afterwards. A phantom ache that flares up with cold or pressure. a rather unwelcome souvenir. Mainstream historical fact. Early European settlers, particularly convicts and free immigrants seeking to farm and expand, were among the first to regularly encounter platypuses and their venomous spurs. They quickly learned, often the hard way, that this seemingly harmless aquatic mammal packed a serious punch. Records from the early 19th century, though sparse and often anecdotal, confirm these painful encounters, painting a consistent picture of extreme, localized pain and swelling. These weren't stories of people keeling over dead, but of individuals incapacitated by agony, their ability to work or even function severely hampered. Imagine trying to clear land or herd sheep with a hand that feels like it's been put through a meat grinder. Not ideal. A quirky tidbit that often gets overlooked is that some indigenous Australian communities had their own understanding of the platypus's defensive capabilities long before European arrival. While detailed accounts are rare due to the oral tradition and the sacred nature of some knowledge, there are whispers of ancient tales that indirectly warn against disturbing the creature, hinting at its potent kick. It wasn't always seen as a bizarre, harmless, duck-billed otter-mole-beaver thing by everyone. Some knew better than to provoke it. These stories, passed down through generations, speak to an intimate knowledge of the land and its creatures, far removed from the scientific classifications that bewildered European naturalists. This brings us to an open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the initial underestimation of the platypus's venom by European naturalists stemmed more from sheer scientific disbelief in its mixed morphology, or from a general lack of experience with venomous monotremes, a category of creature that simply didn't fit into their established biological frameworks. Was it ignorance of the creature, or an overconfidence in their existing taxonomic principles? Did they simply disregard the accounts of pain as typical colonial exaggeration, until enough detailed reports, often from credible sources like doctors or soldiers, started accumulating? It's a fascinating chicken or egg scenario in the history of scientific understanding, highlighting how preconceived notions can sometimes blind even the most brilliant minds to novel biological realities. The evidence suggests a blend of both. A stubborn adherence to Linnaean order encountering a creature that simply refused to fit neatly into any existing box, biological or otherwise. And you, in this moment, are experiencing the very real consequences of that ancient, enduring mystery. Evolutionary venom puzzle. Ponder the evolutionary enigma of a venomous mammal, delving into theories about why the platypus developed such a rare trait. You're still reeling from the thought of that searing pain, the kind that digs into your bones and lingers like an unwelcome houseguest. But now, as the image of the unfortunate victim fades, a different kind of ache sets in. The ache of pure, unadulterated curiosity. Because the platypus, already a walking, swimming, egg-laying, duck-billed enigma, throws yet another curveball that leaves evolutionary biologists scratching their heads. Its venom, you're not just looking at a weird creature, you're gazing into one of nature's most perplexing genetic riddles. Think about it. When you hear venomous creature, your mind likely conjures images of slithering snakes, scuttling spiders, or maybe a jellyfish drifting through azure waters. You picture fangs, stingers, or nematocysts. But a mammal, a furry, duck-billed, beaver-tailed, milk-sweating, egg-laying mammal with venomous spurs on its ankles. It's like finding a unicorn that also happens to be an expert in advanced calculus. It just doesn't fit the established narrative. It rattles the neat little boxes we've built for the natural world, forcing us to ask, why? Why did this particular branch of the mammalian tree decide, at some ancient, pivotal moment, to arm itself with a biological weapon typically reserved for reptiles and invertebrates? The mainstream historical fact here is that the platypus, alongside 4 species of echidna, belongs to the monotremes, an order of mammals that branched off from other mammals some 166 million years ago. This deep evolutionary split means they retained many primitive traits, including egg-laying. But venom, that's not typically considered a primitive mammalian trait. In fact, it's exceedingly rare among mammals, with only a handful of other examples like the shrews and solenodons, whose venoms are distinct and often less potent than the platypus's. This uniqueness begs the question: did they inherit it from a long-lost, venomous reptilian ancestor? Or did they, against all odds, evolve it independently? You might think, well, maybe it's for hunting. The platypus, with its electroreceptors in its bill, forages for invertebrates in murky riverbeds. A quick jab, paralyze, then eat. Seems logical, right? Except no. Platypus venom is deployed via a spur on the male's hind ankle, and they don't use it to subdue prey. They forage with their bills, scooping up worms and insect larvae, completely oblivious to the venomous arsenal lurking on their back legs. So, scratch that theory off the list. Unless they're planning to stun a particularly aggressive earthworm, which, let's be honest, you probably won't survive that kind of confrontation anyway. The most compelling theories delve into the realm of defense and intrasexual competition. Imagine a male platypus. During the breeding season, its normally docile nature replaced by a testosterone-fueled intensity. He's navigating his watery territory, eyeing up potential mates, and fending off rivals. His venom-laden spur becomes a deterrent, a biological equivalent of a gang member flashing their colors. The venom, remember, causes excruciating pain, but isn't typically lethal to a rival platypus. It's debilitating, a clear signal to back off. This fits neatly with the observed seasonal activity of the venom glands, which swell significantly during the breeding season. It's like nature's way of saying, if you want this territory, you'll have to go through my ankle. This leads us to a quirky or fringe tidbit. Some early, more speculative theories even suggested the venom might have been used defensively against larger predators. Perhaps an ancient, oversized eel or a prehistoric crocodile attempted to snag a platypus, only to receive a painful surprise. While this isn't entirely dismissed, the specific location of the spur and the nature of the venom's effects, more pain-inducing than immediately incapacitating, leans away from it being a primary anti-predator device for most scenarios. It's more of a "you'll regret that" than a "you're dead now" kind of weapon. Imagine a tiny, fluffy ninja delivering a kick that leaves you sobbing uncontrollably for weeks. That's the vibe. So the prevailing wind blows towards sexual selection. The idea that males with more potent venom, or perhaps just the ability to have venom, gained an advantage in securing mates and territory. This would drive the evolution and maintenance of the venom system. It's a fierce, underwater popularity contest where the losers get a very, very painful reminder of their inadequacy. It's not about killing. It's about making someone wish they were dead for a few days. But scientists continue to debate whether the platypus venom system is a truly novel evolutionary innovation or a repurposed set of genes from a distant ancestor. Did the genes for producing these unique defensins and C-type natriuretic peptides arise entirely de novo in the platypus lineage? Or were they co-opted and adapted from pre-existing genes that had other, more mundane functions. It's a bit like wondering if that brilliant chef invented the concept of seasoning from scratch, or if they just got really, really good at using salt and pepper. The molecular pathways are complex, involving multiple gene families, suggesting a sophisticated, long-term evolutionary investment. The answer could tell us a lot about the incredible plasticity of genomes and the unpredictable twists and turns of evolutionary pathways. The evolutionary path of the platypus is less of a straight highway and more of a winding, scenic route through a forgotten backwoods, with unexpected detours into venomous swamps and electroreceptive rivers. It serves as a constant reminder that evolution doesn't always follow the most obvious or efficient route. Sometimes it throws in a bizarre curveball just because it can, or because a very specific set of environmental and competitive pressures led to a truly unique solution. It's a creature that challenges every preconception you have about what a mammal should be, right down to the microscopic molecules that inflict such agony. And as you consider this profound evolutionary oddity, you start to feel the weight of deep time, the slow, relentless grind of natural selection, shaping life in ways we're still only beginning to comprehend. You've pondered the evolutionary enigma, haven't you? This bizarre, venomous mammal, defying all the neatly categorized boxes scientists tried to cram it into. You've pictured its ancient lineage, the slow, silent creep of genetic mutations that sculpted its unique, potent defense. But now, let's peel back another layer of this platypus-shaped onion. Because even with all we know about its strange, spur-delivered cocktail, the sheer experience of a platypus envenomation remains a deeply unsettling mystery. Imagine, if you will, a dull ache beginning to throb in your ankle, a subtle disquiet. It's a bit like when you've been sitting cross-legged for too long, that pins and needles sensation, only this time it's spreading, blooming outwards. You feel a warmth, then a heat, as if someone's slowly turning up the dial on a stovetop beneath your skin. Soon, that warmth curdles into a searing, white-hot agony. It isn't the sharp, immediate sting of a bee, nor the necrotic burn of a recluse spider. This is something else entirely. This is a pain that drills deep, not just into the muscle, but into the very bone, radiating outwards, seizing your nerves in a vice-like grip. Your skin tightens, stretches, throbbing as the limb swells, a balloon inflating with something far more sinister than air. You watch, horrified, as purple and red hues bloom across your foot, your leg, the vivid bruising a grotesque painting of your suffering. It's a pain that won't respond to anything you throw at it. Ice, elevation, painkillers that would fell an elephant. They seem to merely shrug in the face of this particular torment. It's an unrelenting, soul-crushing agony that could last for days, for weeks, sometimes even for months. A constant, low-frequency hum of misery that infiltrates every waking moment, stealing your sleep, your appetite, your very sanity. And just to manage expectations, you probably won't survive this experience with your good humor intact. Your brain, typically so good at compartmentalizing discomfort, just can't seem to get a handle on it. So why this specific brand of hell? Why doesn't platypus venom, unlike many of its reptilian or arachnid counterparts, cause widespread tissue destruction or organ failure? Instead, it seems laser-focused on inflicting pure, unadulterated pain. This is the persistent pain enigma, a scientific puzzle that continues to baffle researchers, a riddle wrapped in an evolutionary mystery, sealed with a venomous spur. For decades, scientists have poked and prodded, isolated and analyzed, trying to identify the exact compounds responsible for this unique torment. We know the venom is a complex soup of proteins and peptides, a biological alphabet with letters we're still trying to translate. Among them are defensin-like peptides, DLPs, aptly named given their potential role in defense, and C-type natriuretic peptides, CNPs, which can affect blood vessels. But pinpointing the exact combination and cascade that leads to this agonizing, prolonged neuropathic pain has been like trying to find a specific grain of sand on an endless beach, especially when that sand grain is actively trying to make you regret your life choices. One of the mainstream historical facts that underpins this enigma is the stark contrast observed in early clinical accounts. Unlike viper bites, which often lead to immediate, severe swelling, necrosis, and systemic collapse, or certain scorpion stings that produce intense, localized pain followed by rapid systemic effects, platypus envenomation consistently presented with this disproportionate, long-term pain without significant tissue death. Doctors and naturalists, accustomed to classifying venoms by their destructive power, were utterly perplexed. It was almost as if the venom had a specific, malicious intent to cause maximum suffering with minimum actual damage. Think of it as nature's most effective psychological warfare agent. Then there's the quirky or fringe tidbit. For a time, some researchers hypothesized that the venom might somehow trick the body's pain pathways into producing its own pain-amplifying substances, creating a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy of agony. Imagine your body accidentally joining forces with the venom to torture itself. While this specific theory hasn't gained widespread acceptance, it highlights the desperate attempts to understand a mechanism that defies conventional pharmacological understanding. It's like trying to fix a leaky faucet, only to discover the faucet is actively building more leaks just to annoy you. The key to understanding this agonizing persistence, many theorize, lies in the specific interaction of the venom's peptides with sensory neurons, particularly nociceptors, the specialized nerve cells that detect and transmit pain signals. It's not just about triggering these nerves, it's about sensitizing them. Think of it like turning up the volume dial on a pain receptor, then gluing the dial in place. Once sensitized, these nerves become hyperresponsive, firing off pain signals at stimuli that wouldn't normally register, or continuing to fire long after the initial insult has passed. This leads to what's known as hyperalgesia, an increased sensitivity to pain, and allodynia, pain caused by a stimulus that doesn't normally cause pain, like a gentle touch. One of the more frustrating aspects for medical professionals is the profound lack of an effective antidote. Unlike snake venoms, for which antivenoms can neutralize toxins, platypus venom pain simply doesn't respond to standard analgesics, including potent opioids. Why? Because the mechanisms are different. Opioids typically work by binding to opioid receptors in the brain and spinal cord, dampening pain signals. But if the platypus venom is causing pain by directly sensitizing peripheral nerves or disrupting ion channels in a way that bypasses these opioid pathways, then those pain medications are essentially shouting into the wind. It's like trying to put out a fire with a sponge when the problem is that the building itself is made of highly flammable material. This brings us to an open scholarly debate. Historians and scientists still argue whether the primary pain-inducing mechanism is a direct neurotoxin or an indirect inflammatory cascade. Some theories suggest that certain peptides in the venom directly activate specific ion channels on sensory neurons, forcing them to fire relentlessly. Others posit that the venom triggers a massive, sustained inflammatory response that then secondarily sensitizes these nerves, leading to the prolonged pain. And then there are those who believe it's a cunning combination of both, a biological 1-2 punch designed for maximum discomfort. Each theory offers a piece of the puzzle, but none fully explains the unique, enduring nature of the pain. The absence of widespread tissue damage, so typical of inflammatory responses, makes the direct neurotoxic hypothesis particularly compelling. Yet the sustained swelling points to some inflammatory component. It's a real head-scratcher. Researchers today are still trying to isolate the exact compounds responsible for this neurogenic inflammation and sensitization. The hope, ironically, is that by understanding the platypus's weapon, we might find new ways to disarm human pain. Imagine if one of these unique platypus peptides, once understood, could be reverse-engineered to block pain pathways in humans, offering a novel approach to chronic pain relief. The very thing that causes such excruciating agony could, one day, hold the key to alleviating it. It's a concept that is both fascinating and, if you're currently suffering from a phantom ache from that imaginary platypus sting, probably a little bit galling. But for now, the platypus's venom remains a potent symbol of nature's still unyielding mysteries. A small, furry enigma that continues to teach us about the complex, often terrifying, world of biological warfare. And the pain, oh, the pain, remains its most enduring and least understood legacy. You're now moving from the raw, inexplicable agony of the platypus's sting to the hushed, sterile world of the laboratory, where the very components of that pain might just unlock revolutionary cures. Imagine yourself peering over a scientist's shoulder, the fluorescent lights humming softly, casting a cool glow on complex chromatographs and intricate molecular models. They're not looking for pain here. They're hunting for salvation, hidden within that very same bizarre chemical cocktail you've heard so much about. You see them isolating fractions, running assays, their faces etched with the quiet intensity of discovery. It's a painstaking process, breaking down the platypus's potent brew, peptide by peptide, enzyme by enzyme, until bingo. A particular string of amino acids lights up on their screens, a sequence that whispers of hope for millions. This isn't just any peptide. It's one with a striking resemblance to a crucial human hormone. Think of it as a biological lock-and key mechanism, and the platypus, in its infinite evolutionary wisdom, seems to have fashioned a master key. We're talking about GLP-1, or glucagon-like peptide 1, a hormone you produce naturally in your gut, usually after a meal. It's your body's personal sugar traffic controller, telling your pancreas to release insulin when blood sugar levels are high, slowing down digestion, and even making you feel full. Pretty neat, right? Except for people with type 2 diabetes, this system often goes a bit wonky. Their GLP-1 might not be working as efficiently, or it's broken down too quickly by an enzyme called DPP-4. This is where our duck-billed, egg-laying, venomous friend waddles onto the medical stage, like some kind of biological superhero. Albeit one who'd happily give you the worst foot pain of your life. Scientists discovered that the platypus venom contains a unique GLP-1-like peptide, different from but functionally similar to the one found in Gila monster venom, which has already paved the way for diabetes medications. This platypus-specific peptide, unlike our human version, is remarkably stable. It resists the enzymatic breakdown that quickly inactivates human GLP-1. Imagine a fragile piece of paper versus a laminated blueprint. Your body's GLP-1 is the paper. The platypus's is the blueprint, impervious to the shredder. This enhanced stability means it hangs around longer in the bloodstream, doing its job more effectively and for a sustained period. This discovery was, for medical researchers, like finding a diamond in a particularly painful rough. Now, pause for a moment and consider the history here. Before this kind of molecular detective work, before understanding hormones and peptides, managing diabetes was a lot less sophisticated and often, frankly, deadly. You might remember those grim tales of old-world medicine. For centuries, physicians tried everything from bleeding to bizarre dietary restrictions. In fact, for a long time, one of the more peculiar and less effective treatments involved strict starvation diets, essentially trying to starve the sugar out of the body. A method that, while sometimes showing temporary relief, ultimately led to severe malnutrition and often death. You certainly wouldn't want to sign up for that regimen, though perhaps less painful than a platypus spur. Then came the monumental breakthrough of insulin in the early 20th century. You're transported back to the 1920s, to laboratories in Toronto where Frederick Banting and Charles Best, under the guidance of John MacLeod, and with the biochemical expertise of James Collip, painstakingly isolated insulin from pancreatic extracts. This wasn't just a discovery. It was a miracle transforming diabetes from a swiftly fatal diagnosis into a manageable chronic condition. It was a mainstream historical fact that reshaped human health, giving millions a second chance at life. And now, decades later, you're witnessing the potential for another paradigm shift, springing from an animal so utterly improbable it almost seems like a cosmic joke. The platypus, it seems, isn't just an evolutionary oddity. It's an overachiever, a genetic show-off with a potentially life-saving secret. And while you marvel at its biological cleverness, you probably won't survive this if you encounter a male platypus in a bad mood and get a dose of its full venom. We're talking about the part that causes weeks of mind-numbing pain. Remember, it's a good thing scientists can extract the beneficial bits without you having to experience the full, horrifying package. That's a reality check that truly puts things into perspective, isn't it? One tiny molecule for good, wrapped in a whole lot of agony. But why would a creature like the platypus develop such a stable, long-lasting GLP-1 in its venom in the first place? This isn't a question with a simple answer, and the evolutionary path of this specific venom component remains a subject of intense scholarly debate. Some theories suggest it might play a role in incapacitating prey by causing a rapid metabolic disruption, essentially throwing their internal systems into chaos, making them easier to handle. Others speculate it's a byproduct, a fortunate coincidence where a protein evolved for one purpose inadvertently gained another, medically significant function. Imagine a wrench designed for plumbing that turns out to be surprisingly good at opening pickle jars. You wouldn't design it for that, but hey, bonus. The beauty of this discovery, however, lies in its implications. Because the platypus's GLP-1 peptide is so stable, it's a prime candidate for developing new, longer-acting treatments for type 2 diabetes. Current GLP-1 receptor agonists, derived from things like Gila monster venom, already exist and are incredibly effective. But the platypus offers an even more robust template. It hints at a future where injections might be less frequent, where blood sugar control is even more precise, and where the side effects are minimized. It's like upgrading from a reliable old car to a sleek, super-efficient model, all thanks to a creature that looks like it was designed by a committee of kindergartners. You can almost hear the excited chatter in the labs, the late-night sessions fueled by coffee, and the sheer thrill of possibility. The journey from a venomous spur to a potential cure is a winding one, full of dead ends and unexpected detours, but it exemplifies the relentless human pursuit of understanding and healing. It's a reminder that nature, in its most peculiar and even dangerous forms, holds secrets we are only just beginning to decipher. And who would have thought that the answer to a global health challenge might just come from a shy, semi-aquatic mammal that mostly just wants to be left alone to forage for grubs? It's enough to make you chuckle softly, isn't it? The universe truly has a bizarre sense of humor, often hiding its most profound solutions in the most unlikely of places. You visualize pharmaceutical companies now, not extracting venom from live platypuses. Because, let's be real, that's both cruel and impractical, and imagine the safety briefing for that job. But rather synthesizing these peptides in vast bioreactors, replicating the platypus's clever molecular design without bothering the platypus itself. It's a triumph of biotechnology, mirroring nature's ingenuity in a controlled environment. This is where the magic happens. A tiny, obscure piece of a bizarre animal's defense mechanism, painstakingly reverse-engineered and mass-produced to improve human lives. From a painful evolutionary adaptation to a beacon of medical hope, the platypus continues to surprise, even from the silent depths of its freshwater habitat. Its venom, once merely a source of excruciating pain, now holds the promise of a sweeter future for millions. You're now standing in a sterile laboratory, the scent of ethanol faint in the air, a faint hum of machinery your only companion. Before you, a shimmering vial holds a minuscule amount of clear liquid platypus venom, or rather, the concentrated essence of its potential. You might not recognize it, but this unassuming fluid represents a fascinating pivot point, a journey from nature's peculiar defense mechanism to a beacon of hope for millions. Think about it. A substance designed to inflict excruciating pain, now being coaxed, cajoled, and chemically tweaked into something that heals. It's almost poetic, isn't it? Though, if you were to simply ingest this vial's contents, you'd probably find yourself on a very different, much more painful, and ultimately unsurvivable journey. Best to leave the direct experimentation to the professionals, wouldn't you say? The initial discovery, remember that surprising little peptide in the venom that looked suspiciously like a glucagon-like peptide 1, or GLP-1, was just the opening act. Imagine a biochemist, late one night, poring over complex molecular structures, and suddenly a double take. Wait a minute, you can almost hear them mumble. This platypus thing, it looks just like something our bodies naturally produce to regulate blood sugar. It was like finding a designer knockoff in a swamp, unexpected, but undeniably intriguing. For centuries, across various cultures, people have intuitively turned to the natural world for remedies, from willow bark for pain relief, the precursor to aspirin, a mainstream historical fact if ever there was one to, well, less effective solutions like that crocodile dung sunscreen we've discussed. But this was different. This wasn't about grinding up an animal and hoping for the best. It was about surgical precision, identifying a specific molecule and understanding its mechanism. The challenge, of course, was taking this fascinating but volatile natural compound and making it suitable for human consumption. Our bodies are notoriously fussy. They don't much care for foreign peptides, especially those delivered via a venomous spur. They tend to break them down rather quickly, or worse, mount an immune response that makes you feel a whole lot worse than you did before. So, while the platypus offered a tantalizing clue, the direct application was a non-starter. It's like finding a perfectly good car engine, only to realize it runs on whale blubber and needs a giant squid to change gears. You appreciate the ingenuity, but you're going to need a few modifications. This is where the Gila monster enters the narrative, a truly quirky tidbit if there ever was one, and perhaps a touch of historical irony. While the platypus was quietly and painfully hinting at a GLP-1 connection, another venomous creature, the slow-moving, bead-skinned Gila monster from the American Southwest, had already provided a similar, yet more stable, GLP-1-like peptide. Scientists had been studying its venom, called exendin-4, for its potential anti-diabetic properties. It turned out, exendin-4 was remarkably resistant to the enzymes in our bodies that quickly degrade natural GLP-1. This stability made it an ideal candidate for drug development. So, while the platypus offered corroborating evidence and deepened our understanding of these venom-derived peptides, it was the Gila monster that ultimately provided the blueprint for the first commercial GLP-1 receptor agonist drug. This led to the development of exenatide, marketed under the brand name Byetta, for the treatment of type 2 diabetes. Historians still argue whether the platypus's later discovery was more of a Me Too moment, validating a pathway already being explored, or if it truly provided novel insights that accelerated research in the broader field of venomics. Frankly, it probably did a bit of both. The journey from a curious peptide to a commercial drug is, as you can imagine, not a quick jaunt. It's a marathon riddled with scientific hurdles, ethical considerations, and enough paperwork to fell a small forest. First, you isolate the compound. Then you spend years understanding exactly how it interacts with cellular receptors. Does it activate them? Block them? Does it cause any unwanted side effects? Then comes the painstaking process of creating a synthetic version that can be reliably produced in large quantities, and crucially, that remains stable within the human body. Think of it. Transforming a molecule designed to wreak havoc into one that precisely, gently, nudges your body back towards balance. It's like teaching a grizzly bear to perform ballet. Possible, but requires immense patience and very specialized training. Once you have a stable, synthetic analog, it's time for preclinical trials, testing in cells and animals to ensure safety and efficacy. If those go well, then you move to human clinical trials, a multi-phase process that can take a decade or more. Phase 1 trials check for safety in a small group of healthy volunteers. Phase 2 assesses efficacy and optimal dosing in a larger group of patients. Phase 3 compares the new drug to existing treatments in an even larger, diverse patient population. Only after successfully navigating these rigorous stages, demonstrating both safety and significant benefit, does a drug gain approval from regulatory bodies like the FDA? Exenatide's journey was no different, a testament to the methodical, often agonizingly slow process of modern drug development. It marked a significant step forward in diabetes treatment, offering a new class of medication that not only helped control blood sugar, but also, for some, led to weight loss, a welcome side effect for many type 2 diabetes patients. The platypus, in its own bizarre way, played an unwitting, though crucial, role in illuminating this path. A tiny biological whisper that became a loud, clear therapeutic message. You peer into the gleaming, sterile vials, each containing a minuscule, almost imperceptible drop of something that, just moments ago, coursed through the body of one of Earth's most peculiar creatures. You've seen how one tiny peptide from this complex brew, a mimic of our own GLP-1, offered a glimmer of hope for diabetes. Remember that unexpected journey from venom to pharmacy? Well, that was just the appetizer. Now you're standing at the threshold of a much larger, darker, and infinitely more promising vault. The Platypus Venom's hidden medical trove. It's like discovering a secret room in an ancient pyramid, not filled with gold, but with biological blueprints for things we never imagined. Think of venom not as a single weapon, but as a miniature chemical factory, churning out thousands of unique compounds, each with a specific biological action. For centuries, our medical progress has often hinged on observing nature's solutions to its own problems. The very first antibiotics, for instance, weren't born in a gleaming lab, but painstakingly isolated from soil microbes. A truly mainstream historical fact that underscores our continued reliance on nature's pharmacy. It's simply good sense to check what else nature's got cooking. And what's cooking in Platypus Venom? A whole lot, it turns out. One of the most exciting burgeoning research avenues explores the venom's antimicrobial properties. It makes sense, really. A platypus, scuttling around in murky riverbeds, digging burrows, interacting with all sorts of delightful microbes, it needs a robust immune system. And its venom, a biological secretion, is surprisingly sterile. Scientists hypothesize that certain peptides within the venom act as natural disinfectants, capable of punching holes in bacterial cell walls or disrupting their internal machinery. Imagine, if you will, bacteria being so put off by a venomous peptide that they just pack their bags and leave, perhaps muttering something about the platypus being a rather rude host. This could be incredibly significant in an age where antibiotic resistance is, frankly, becoming a nightmare. You know, those superbugs that laugh in the face of our strongest drugs. Well, the platypus might just have a peptide that makes them nervous. It's like finding a universal key when all your locks have different tumblers. And here's a quirky tidbit for you. Some of the most potent natural antimicrobials have been found in the most unexpected places, like the skin secretions of frogs or even the slime of hagfish. Nature, it seems, enjoys a good surprise. But the real showstopper, the one that makes headlines and sets research grants ablaze, is the anti-cancer potential. Now, hold your horses. We're not talking about injecting yourself with raw platypus venom. You probably won't survive this. And even if you did, you'd be in a world of hurt. We're talking about highly refined, isolated compounds. The theory goes that some venom peptides are incredibly selective. They can identify the subtle differences between a healthy cell and a rogue cancer cell, then bind to the cancerous one, triggering its self-destruction or preventing its growth, all while leaving the good cells alone. It's the ultimate precision strike, a biochemical sniper rifle aimed at the heart of the tumor. You see, cancer cells often have altered membranes or unique protein receptors on their surface, making them prime targets for molecules that evolve to disrupt very specific biological pathways. This isn't just wishful thinking. There's legitimate, if early, research showing promising results in lab dishes and animal models. Think about the relentless growth of a tumor, just expanding without care, like your family after a holiday meal. Platypus venom components, particularly those that cause cell lysis or interfere with cell signaling, might just be the unwelcome guest at that uncontrolled cellular feast. However, historians still argue whether the ethical and practical hurdles of developing such potent compounds for widespread human use can ever be fully overcome, especially when considering potential off-target effects and the sheer cost of development. It's a thorny debate, balancing immense promise with significant risk. It's also one of those areas where you realize scientists, bless their cotton socks, are both incredibly brilliant and occasionally utterly mad. They're basically saying, hey, what if we take the thing that causes excruciating pain and turn it into something that cures disease? You have to admire their audacity. Beyond antimicrobials and anti-cancer agents, the venom holds other tantalizing secrets. Remember, the platypus stings uniquely persistent pain. Ironically, studying the mechanisms of this pain could lead to novel pain management strategies. If you understand exactly how something causes pain, you might be able to figure out how to block that pathway. It's like understanding how a bad concert produces terrible sound, so you can design perfect acoustics. There's also research into compounds that affect blood clotting, either promoting it, which could be vital for trauma, or inhibiting it, useful for conditions like deep vein thrombosis or strokes. And then there are the neuroactive peptides, which could potentially offer insights into neurological disorders. Each tiny molecule is a puzzle piece, waiting for the right scientist with the right magnifying glass to figure out where it fits in the grand tapestry of human health. The platypus, it seems, is not just a biological oddity, but a living, swimming biochemical library. Its venom a silent, potent testament to evolution's boundless creativity, still holding more secrets than we can possibly imagine. You've just been captivated by the potential hidden within that complex chemical cocktail, the platypus venom, envisioning its journey from a quirky peptide to a life-saving drug. But now you shift your focus from the abstract marvel of molecular structures to the gritty, often frustrating reality of how you actually get that venom. Imagine, if you will, the Australian night. You're knee-deep in a cold, murky stream, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and eucalyptus. The only sounds are the rustle of leaves, the distant croak of a frog, and perhaps, just perhaps, the soft ripple of water as a shy, elusive creature paddles by. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, and frankly, in this scenario, you sort of have to, is to collect platypus venom. Sounds straightforward, right? A quick squirt, a tiny vial, and you're off to the lab. Oh, bless your optimistic heart. The reality, my friend, is a masterclass in patience, persistence, and frankly, a willingness to get very, very wet and very, very cold. And you probably won't survive this particular task without a very serious anti-tetanus shot and a lot of patience, let alone managing to avoid that infamous ankle spur. But hey, for science, right? First, you have to find one. Platypuses are not exactly keen on being found. They're nocturnal, incredibly shy, and perfectly adapted to disappearing into their underwater burrows the moment they sense a disturbance. You're not just looking for a platypus. You're effectively trying to catch a living, breathing, incredibly slippery ghost. You set up fine mesh nets designed to be harmless but effective across sections of the stream. Then you wait, and wait some more. Sometimes you wait all night for absolutely nothing. On a good night, you might gently scoop a single platypus from the net. It's a moment of cautious triumph mixed with a healthy dose of trepidation, because now comes the really delicate part. Handling a platypus is not like handling, say, a hamster. They're surprisingly strong for their size, their webbed feet offer excellent grip, and those male platypuses, well, they come with a built-in surprise. You need specialized training, a very firm but gentle grip, and a deep understanding of their anatomy to safely secure the animal without causing undue stress or, crucially, getting stung yourself. Remember that excruciating, persistent pain we talked about. Yeah, you really don't want to experience that firsthand. The spur itself is tiny, but it's directly connected to a venom gland, and the platypus knows how to use it. Many an eager researcher has learned this the hard way, leaving the encounter with a newfound respect for the platypus's potent defense mechanism and a throbbing, swollen limb. It's a bit like trying to collect honey from an angry bee without getting stung, except the bee is also a master of camouflage and lives underwater. Once safely restrained, the actual venom collection is an intricate dance of precision and speed. Unlike snakes, which you can milk for venom by encouraging them to bite a collection vessel, a platypus doesn't just offer up its venom. The process often involves a very gentle electrical stimulation of the area around the spur, coaxing the gland to release its precious fluid. And even then, the yield is minuscule. We're talking drops, mere microliters, not vials full. This tiny output means that every single drop is incredibly valuable, adding another layer of pressure to an already challenging procedure. Plus, it's only the males that are venomous, and their venom production is seasonal, peaking during breeding season. So you can't just turn up any time of year and expect a full supply. You're beholden to nature's fickle schedule. This seasonality, a quirky biological tidbit, means that research windows are often narrow, adding to the logistical nightmare of collection. The practical difficulties don't end there. You're often working in remote locations, far from immediate medical assistance or sophisticated lab equipment. The samples need to be kept cold, transported carefully, and processed quickly to maintain the integrity of those delicate peptides. It's a testament to the dedication of venom researchers that any significant progress has been made at all. Historically, early naturalists faced similar, if not greater, challenges. When they first encountered the platypus, simply observing it in its natural habitat was a monumental task, let alone trying to understand its unique biology or, God forbid, collect samples. Their methods were often crude, and their understanding of animal welfare was, to put it mildly, evolving. This brings us to the ethical considerations, a conversation that has grown increasingly prominent and complex over the years. You can't just go around zapping platypuses willy-nilly, even if it's for the noble cause of medical science. There's a profound responsibility to ensure the animal's well-being is paramount. Researchers must obtain strict permits, often from multiple government agencies, and adhere to rigorous ethical guidelines. These guidelines dictate everything from the type of nets used, to the duration of handling, to the post-collection monitoring of the platypus to ensure it recovers quickly and without lasting harm. The goal is always to minimize stress, pain, and any potential long-term impact on the individual animal or the platypus population as a whole. Scientists still debate the optimal, least invasive methods for venom extraction, constantly refining techniques to ensure both scientific efficacy and paramount ethical standards are met. It's a constant balancing act between the pursuit of knowledge and the welfare of a truly unique creature. Sometimes, the ethical discussion even pushes researchers to consider alternative approaches. Can we synthesize the key venom components in a lab without ever touching a live platypus? Can we use gene sequencing to understand the venom's blueprint and then produce it artificially? These questions are at the forefront of modern venomics, pushing the boundaries of biotechnology to circumvent the challenges and ethical dilemmas of direct collection. But for now, the primary way to understand the full complexity of platypus venom often still involves those intrepid, dedicated researchers, ankle-deep in a cold stream, hoping to gently, responsibly, and successfully extract those precious few drops. It's a reminder that even in the age of advanced science, some of nature's secrets still demand a very hands-on and occasionally painful approach. Venom, who owns its secrets? You're standing in a rainforest, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and unseen blossoms, the calls of unseen birds echoing through the canopy. Sunlight, dappled and elusive, filters down in shards, illuminating dust motes dancing in the humid air. You feel the primitive urge to explore, to discover, to perhaps even claim. This isn't just a physical space. It's a living library, each leaf, each insect, each, dare we say, platypus, a volume waiting to be deciphered. And you, dear listener, you hold the potential to unlock its secrets. But here's the rub, the ethical thorn in the side of scientific progress. Who truly owns these secrets once they're revealed? Who has the right to profit from a marvel like the platypus's venom, discovered not by human ingenuity, but by millions of years of natural selection? You pick up a fallen leaf, tracing its intricate veins, and ponder the vast biological wealth around you. It's a treasure trove, certainly, but unlike buried gold, this treasure is alive, dynamic, and its extraction raises questions that often feel more tangled than the jungle vines themselves. Think back to the discovery of exenatide, that groundbreaking diabetes drug we chatted about, remember? The one born from the saliva of the Gila monster, a lizard found in the deserts of the American Southwest. This wasn't platypus venom, granted, but it set a precedent, a very clear pathway from wild creature to pharmaceutical triumph. The Gila monster's contribution, or rather, the contribution of its evolutionary history, led to billions in sales. But who benefited from that windfall? Was it the indigenous communities whose ancestral lands harbored these creatures, who perhaps held millennia-old knowledge about the plants and animals around them? Or was it the pharmaceutical giants who isolated, synthesized, and marketed the active compounds? You probably won't survive this kind of ethical quagmire without feeling a little bit conflicted, to be honest. It's a question that makes even the most well-meaning scientists squirm in their lab coat. This brings us squarely to the concept of bioprospecting, a rather sanitized term for what often feels like a high-stakes treasure hunt. You, the intrepid explorer, venture into biodiversity hotspots, rainforests, coral reefs, even the muddy banks where platypuses frolic, seeking out novel compounds with potential medical or industrial applications. It's an exciting prospect, a fusion of biology and commerce, promising cures for diseases and innovative new materials. But the ethical tightrope walk begins the moment you collect your first sample. Is it yours to take? Yours to study? Yours to patent? Or does it, in some deeper sense, belong to the land, to the people who have lived alongside these species for generations, to the ecosystems that nurtured their existence? Historians still argue whether the initial encounters with indigenous populations during the age of exploration were truly collaborative or simply opportunistic, a debate that echoes in the bioprospecting discourse today. It's not quite as straightforward as finding a shiny pebble and sticking it in your pocket. Consider the case of the humble rosy periwinkle, a plant native to Madagascar. In the mid-20th century, pharmaceutical researchers discovered powerful anti-cancer compounds within it. leading to life-saving drugs like vincristine and vinblastine. These drugs revolutionized childhood leukemia treatment and generated immense profits. Yet, for decades, Madagascar, the source of this botanical marvel, received little to no direct benefit from its discovery. You might imagine the Malagasy people feeling a bit like they'd just hosted a very successful party, only to find the guests left with all the snacks and none of the washing up was done. This mainstream historical fact serves as a stark reminder of the potential for imbalance in bioprospecting ventures. This is where the idea of benefit sharing steps onto the stage, a concept designed to ensure that the source country, or the local communities, receive a fair and equitable share of the benefits arising from the utilization of their genetic resources. It's a lovely idea in theory, like promising your little sibling a piece of your candy if they don't tell mom you took an extra one. But in practice, it's incredibly complex. What constitutes fair and equitable? Is it a percentage of profits, technology transfer, capacity building for local scientists, or something else entirely? The Nagoya Protocol, an international agreement, was established to provide a legal framework for this very issue, aiming to prevent the unchecked exploitation of genetic resources. It tries to draw a clear line in the sand, but as you know, sand lines have a habit of getting swept away by the next tide. The quirky tidbit here is that even within scientific communities, there's a growing movement towards decolonizing biology, which includes re-evaluating historical bioprospecting practices and pushing for more equitable partnerships. It's not just about what's legally right, but what's morally just. Imagine a scientist from a wealthy nation arriving in a remote village, taking samples, and then disappearing back to their high-tech lab, never to be heard from again until a new drug hits the market. It feels a bit like those old adventure movies where the hero just helps himself to ancient artifacts, doesn't it? Except now, the artifacts are living organisms with potentially enormous value. When it comes to platypus venom, the debate intensifies. Australia, as the platypus's exclusive homeland, certainly has a claim over its unique biodiversity. But within Australia, there are indigenous communities who have lived alongside the platypus for tens of thousands of years, holding a deep ecological understanding and connection to the land and its creatures. Should they have a say and receive a share in any discoveries derived from the platypus? These aren't easy questions, and there are no simple yes or no answers, much like trying to decide if you really need that fifth cup of coffee at 9 p.m. The ethical landscape of bioprospecting, particularly with something as medically promising as platypus venom, forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about power dynamics, historical injustices, and the very definition of ownership in the natural world. It's a fascinating, if sometimes frustrating, intersection of science, law, and morality, and one that continues to evolve as our understanding of both biology and social justice deepens. The platypus, in its silent, venomous way, isn't just offering potential cures. It's also asking us to reflect on our own responsibilities to the planet and its myriad, magnificent inhabitants. You stand in the flickering torchlight of an ancient healer's hut, the air thick with the scent of dried herbs and something else. A low thrum of drums outside barely masks the murmuring of incantations. Before you, on a rough-hewn table, a small, intricate clay pot sits, its lid sealed. You know what's inside. It's not a healing potion mixed from wildflowers. It's something far more potent, far more dangerous. A single, misjudged drop, a tiny scratch, and you probably won't survive this. You might be wondering, given our recent discussion on the ownership of nature's potent secrets, who dared to claim these particular secrets from the wild, and why? Well, let's step back, way back, through the annals of human desperation and ingenuity. For millennia, before we even dreamed of lab coats or clinical trials, humanity looked to the natural world, often with a mix of reverence and raw terror, for remedies. And few creatures commanded such a potent blend of both as the snake. Imagine ancient Egyptian physicians, not just mummifying pharaohs and prescribing crocodile dung sunscreen, remember that one, but also carefully extracting venom from asps. In fact, a mainstream historical fact you might find fascinating is that the Ebers Papyrus, an ancient Egyptian medical text dating back to around 1550 BC, contains recipes that are believed to incorporate snake venom for various ailments, particularly those involving chronic pain, swelling, and even some neurological conditions. Imagine the painstaking process of collecting it, then administering it, all without the benefit of modern toxicology or even a really good microscope. You'd need a steady hand and, let's be honest, a fair bit of courage, or perhaps just a desperate patient. From the bustling marketplaces of ancient India, where Ayurvedic practitioners spoke of sarpa visha, snake poison, being used to balance bodily humors, to traditional Chinese medicine, where specific snake venoms were prescribed for everything from chronic pain to paralysis, the belief was widespread. What could kill could also, paradoxically, heal. They weren't precisely sure how it worked, probably just figured if it hurt that much, it must be doing something. It was a gamble for sure. One minute you're trying to cure your aching back, the next well, let's just say you're no longer aching. The line between therapeutic dose and fatal overdose was, shall we say, a bit blurrier than your morning vision without coffee. But it wasn't just the slithery kind that held pharmaceutical potential. Consider the humble bee, whose sting, while usually just a minor inconvenience, has a surprisingly long and buzzing history in medicine. Apitherapy, as it's now called, is the practice of using bee products, including bee venom, for medicinal purposes. Ancient Greeks and Romans were reportedly keen on it for joint pain and arthritis. You'd think they'd prefer a nice, relaxing massage, but no, let's poke ourselves with angry bees. It might sound like a particularly masochistic spa day, but for centuries people swore by it. They believed the localized inflammatory response triggered by the bee venom could actually reduce chronic inflammation in the long run, almost like fighting fire with. Well, a smaller, angrier fire. Beyond snakes and bees, other venomous creatures found their way into the ancient apothecary. Scorpions, for instance, were sources of both fear and fascination, with their venom sometimes used in traditional Middle Eastern and African medicine for conditions ranging from epilepsy to certain cancers, often ingested in highly diluted forms or applied topically. Now for a quirky tidbit. In some ancient cultures, particularly in parts of medieval Europe, it was believed that applying a poultice made from a freshly killed viper, or even just its venomous fangs, directly to a wound could draw out poisons or cure fevers. Which, frankly, sounds like a great way to turn a fever into a much, much worse problem. But hey, they didn't have Netflix to distract them, so they had to invent their own extreme reality shows. As humanity progressed from purely folkloric remedies to more empirical observations, the fascination with venoms didn't wane, it merely evolved. Renaissance alchemists and early naturalists began to observe the physiological effects of venoms with a more critical eye. trying to discern patterns and active principles, rather than just relying on mystical beliefs or divine intervention. They were still far from isolating peptides, of course, and their methods were often experimental, to say the least, but the seed of scientific inquiry was sown, pushing beyond the notion of just good luck if it works. This was the dawn of a more structured, if still often dangerous, approach to understanding these powerful biological tools. Fast forward to today, and that ancient fascination has blossomed into a full-blown pharmacological gold rush. Remember how we discussed the platypus venom's surprising connection to diabetes treatment, leading to drugs like exenatide. That wasn't a sudden, isolated discovery. It was the culmination of thousands of years of human observation, trial, and error, with a lot more error than trial initially. The fundamental idea that powerful biological agents found in venoms could be harnessed for medicine is as old as civilization itself, just now turbocharged by modern science. However, despite the historical accounts and modern breakthroughs, historians still argue whether the efficacy of many ancient venom treatments was due to actual pharmacological action, a powerful placebo effect, or perhaps even a fortunate combination of mild, transient effects and the body's own incredible capacity for healing. It's often hard to tell if someone felt better because the bee venom truly helped their arthritis, or because they believed it would, and then just got used to the occasional sting. The truth, as often happens, probably lies somewhere in the murky middle. So, you see, the platypus venom isn't just a bizarre modern medical mystery. It's the latest chapter in an incredibly long, often terrifying, and undeniably fascinating human story. A story of exploring the deadliest secrets of the natural world, not just for survival, but for healing. From the ancient healers risking their lives with snake bites to modern scientists meticulously isolating peptides, the journey of venom from feared weapon to potential panacea is one of humanity's most enduring and, frankly, most daring quests. And we're just getting started. Venomics. New era of discovery. You're standing on the cusp of something truly extraordinary. A scientific frontier where the very poisons that once promised pain and death are now meticulously unraveled, molecule by precious molecule, in the relentless pursuit of life. Imagine it, a hushed, sterile laboratory, bathed in the soft hum of cutting-edge machinery, far removed from the steamy jungle or the murky depths where these biological weapons are forged. This is the domain of venomics, a field so audacious, so revolutionary, it makes those old alchemists with their lead-to-gold pipe dreams look positively quaint. It's here, among the chromatographs and mass spectrometers, that the vast, largely untapped pharmaceutical potential of animal venoms is finally being unlocked. And let's be real, while we're talking about unlocking nature's secrets with fancy tech, if you ever had to personally extract some of these venoms in the wild, you probably wouldn't survive this particular history lesson to tell the tale. Just a little reality check from your friendly narrator. So what exactly is venomics, beyond sounding like a villain from a comic book? It's the systematic, high-throughput analysis of venom. Every single component, every tiny peptide, every complex protein, to understand its intricate biological composition, and crucially, to figure out what medicinal magic it might hold. Think of it as a super-advanced, molecular-level forensic investigation. But instead of solving a crime, we're trying to cure a disease. For centuries, our understanding of venoms was largely anecdotal, based on observed effects, or, at best, rudimentary biochemical tests. We knew snake venom could kill, and maybe in the right hands it could thin blood. But the sheer complexity, the dizzying array of hundreds, sometimes thousands, of distinct molecules within a single drop of venom, remained largely a black box. This is where the new era truly kicks in, powered by what scientists fondly call high-throughput technology. Picture giant, automated robotic systems, not unlike those fancy coffee machines that remember your order. But instead of frothing milk, they're processing hundreds of venom samples simultaneously. These technologies, things like next-generation sequencing, which reads the genetic blueprints of venom components at warp speed, and mass spectrometry, which weighs and identifies those components with incredible precision, have utterly transformed the landscape. Before, isolating a single promising peptide from a venom might take years of painstaking, manual labor. A bit like trying to find a specific grain of sand on a vast beach using tweezers. Now these machines can do it in days, even hours, sifting through the biochemical noise to pinpoint the exact molecules of interest. It's truly incredible, a testament to human ingenuity. Though, as anyone who's ever tried to assemble flat-pack furniture knows, high throughput doesn't always guarantee trouble-free. One mainstream historical fact that underscores this shift is the evolution of anti-venom production. For a long time, the primary method involved injecting animals, usually horses, with small, increasing doses of venom, then harvesting their antibodies. It was effective but crude. The advent of venomics, however, allows researchers to identify the specific toxic components responsible for the most damaging effects, paving the way for more targeted, refined, and potentially less reactive anti-venoms. It's a leap from broad-spectrum warfare to precision-guided missiles, all thanks to a deeper understanding of the venom's molecular architecture. You see, historically, medicine often worked by brute force or happy accident. Now we're getting surgical with nature's nastiest cocktails. And here's a quirky little tidbit that highlights the unexpected treasures venomics uncovers. Did you know that certain spider venoms, specifically from funnel-web spiders, contain peptides that can prevent brain damage after a stroke? Yes, the very creatures that inspire primal fear in many are now offering hope for one of humanity's most debilitating conditions. It's like finding out your grumpy, reclusive neighbor secretly bakes the best cookies in town, completely unexpected and potentially life-changing. These aren't just random acts of biochemical kindness. They're the result of meticulous screening by venomic scientists, poring over libraries of toxins, each with its own unique biological fingerprint. But for all the technological prowess, venomics isn't without its points of contention. Academics still hotly debate the most effective strategies for predicting the pharmacological activity of a novel venom, peptide purely from its sequence. Is it better to focus on homology, looking for similarities to known drug compounds, or to cast a wider net with functional assays, testing every peptide's effect on various biological pathways? It's a bit like arguing whether to pick a winning lottery ticket based on past numbers or just buy every single combination. Both approaches have their merits, and the optimal balance for maximizing drug discovery remains an open scholarly debate, fueling countless grant applications and conference arguments. The true marvel of venomics lies in its promise to unlock the vast pharmaceutical potential. Imagine a library, but instead of books, every shelf is laden with vials of venom, each containing a symphony of unique molecules. Before venomics, we could only read the titles, maybe a few pages. Now we can scan every single word, every nuance. This granular understanding allows scientists to pinpoint individual molecules, like the GLP-1 peptide we discussed from the platypus venom that led to diabetes medication. And then, through a process of refinement and synthesis, turn them into therapeutic agents. It's a bit like discovering a hidden recipe in an ancient cookbook, then meticulously recreating it in a modern kitchen with all the latest gadgets. The applications are truly mind-boggling. Beyond diabetes, venoms are being explored for their potential as painkillers, far more potent and less addictive than current opioids, as well as anti-cancer agents, antimicrobials, and even treatments for autoimmune diseases. The sheer diversity of effects that venoms can produce, from paralyzing prey to altering blood pressure, suggests an almost infinite pharmacopoeia waiting to be discovered. It's a brave new world where the deadliest of nature's tools are being repurposed, not to harm, but to heal. And just when you thought the platypus was done surprising you, Venomics reveals that its bizarre little sting might be just one chapter in a much larger, more incredible story of medical revelation. You feel it now, a ghost limb of agony where no limb exists, a phantom fire licking at nerve endings that scream without reason. It's not the sharp, immediate sting of a bee or the throbbing ache of a sprained ankle. No, this is something far more insidious. A deep-seated hum of torment that infiltrates your very being, twisting itself around your perception of reality until every thought is colored by the pervasive, relentless thrum of pain. Imagine 1,000 tiny needles, not just pricking the surface, but burrowing, twisting, and then staying, vibrating with an electrical current that refuses to dissipate. Your skin feels hypersensitive, yet numb. Every touch, every breath, seems to amplify the internal cacophony. This isn't just pain. It's a recalibration of your nervous system, a cruel remapping of sensation that tells you, in no uncertain terms, that you probably won't survive this without a serious reevaluation of your life choices, perhaps involving a very strong sedative. This, my dear listener, is the unholy embrace of neuropathic pain, and it's precisely why the platypus venom remains such a perplexing medical mystery. We've talked about its potent cocktail, its ability to induce excruciating, long-lasting pain, but what makes it neuropathic is the key. It means the pain isn't merely a signal from damaged tissue, like stubbing your toe. Instead, the venom itself appears to directly assault and disrupt your nervous system, causing the nerves to misfire, to send constant, erroneous signals of pain to your brain. It's like your body's own alarm system has been hacked, stuck on a permanent, ear-splitting siren, even when there's no immediate threat. Traditional painkillers, the ones you'd reach for after a nasty fall or a toothache, opioids, NSAIDs, paracetamol, they barely make a dent. Imagine trying to put out a forest fire with a watering can, and you're close to understanding the futility. These conventional drugs work on different pain pathways, largely targeting inflammation or broad pain receptors. But the platypus venom seems to bypass these, striking at the very core of nerve function. Researchers hypothesize it might involve specific ion channels on nerve cells, those tiny gates that control the flow of electrical signals. Perhaps it's like jamming a key into a lock and breaking it off, leaving the door perpetually ajar, letting in a flood of unwanted pain signals. Or maybe it's less about a direct structural attack and more about a chemical chaos, disrupting the delicate balance of neurotransmitters, those chemical messengers that allow your nerves to communicate. This is why the pain is described as burning, stabbing, or electric hallmarks of neuropathic torment. Historically, the understanding of nerve pain has been a slow and arduous journey. For centuries, pain was simply pain. It was seen as a symptom of a physical ailment, or sometimes even a moral failing. Ancient Greek physicians, like Hippocrates, were astute observers but lacked the tools to delve into the microscopic world of neurons. They might describe a burning sensation, but attribute it to an imbalance of humors, or a hot disease. It wasn't until the 19th century, with the advent of more sophisticated anatomical studies and a clearer understanding of the nervous system, that medical science began to truly differentiate between nociceptive pain from tissue damage and neuropathic pain. Even then, treatment was largely a guessing game, often involving bizarre concoctions or desperate measures that, frankly, sound more like torture than therapy. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen. Imagine the pain relief equivalent, perhaps a poultice of fermented newt entrails. You'd probably just beg for the platypus venom to finish you off. One quirky tidbit about pain perception is how subjective it truly is. While platypus venom clearly causes immense, measurable distress, the experience of pain is deeply personal. Your brain doesn't just receive signals, it interprets them, filters them through your past experiences, your emotional state, even your cultural background. This is why some people might describe the platypus sting as the worst pain they've ever felt, while others, though clearly suffering, might manage a grimace and a mumbled curse. It's not that the pain isn't real or severe. It's that your brain is the ultimate arbiter, the final editor of your sensory input. This makes studying and quantifying the subjective impact of venom-induced neuropathic pain incredibly challenging. The debate among scholars regarding platypus venom and its primary mode of action still rages. Is it primarily neurotoxic, directly damaging nerve tissue? Or is it neuroinflammatory, causing such a profound inflammatory response around nerve endings that they become hypersensitive and dysfunctional? And then, of course, there's the question of its unique duration. Why does this neuropathic pain persist for days, weeks, or even months, long after the initial inflammatory response should have subsided? Some theories suggest that the venom might trigger a lasting alteration in nerve function, a kind of rewiring that creates a chronic pain state. This is a terrifying prospect, turning an acute injury into a persistent disability, a concept all too familiar to those who suffer from chronic neuropathic conditions after accidents or illnesses. The difficulty in studying this specific pain mechanism is multi-layered. First, there's the sheer complexity of the human nervous system itself. A vast, intricate network of billions of neurons, each capable of nuanced communication. Pinpointing the exact molecular targets of the venom is like finding a single, misbehaving pixel on a gigantic, constantly shifting screen. Second, as we've discussed, collecting the venom is no walk in the park. It's a dangerous, painstaking process that yields only tiny amounts of this precious biological sample. And finally, there are the ethical considerations of experimental models. How do you accurately replicate the human experience of this profound neuropathic pain in a way that is both scientifically valid and ethically sound? It's a tightrope walk that researchers navigate with immense care. The persistent, unanswered questions surrounding the platypus's venom-induced neuropathic pain mean that while we can marvel at its bizarre evolutionary journey and its potential for diabetes treatment, the true agony of its sting remains, for now, a profound and lingering medical enigma. Platypus's own venom shield, Consider how platypuses might protect themselves from their own venom and the implications for understanding venom resistance. You're watching, silent, as the platypus glides through the cool, clear water of an Australian creek. Its bill probes the muddy bottom, seeking out tasty invertebrates. The sun dapples through the eucalyptus leaves overhead, casting shifting patterns on its sleek, furred body. It's a creature of serene efficiency, a living paradox, and right now, you're thinking about the male of the species, the one with the hidden weapon. You recall the potent, agonizing cocktail delivered by that ankle spur, the very definition of a bad day, a pain so profound it makes a stubbed toe feel like a spa treatment. And then, a truly perplexing question surfaces, a biological head-scratcher that keeps researchers up at night, nursing lukewarm coffee. How does this little aquatic enigma not sting itself? I mean, it's not exactly going around wearing tiny venom-proof boots, is it? This is where things get truly wild, because if you accidentally jab yourself with your own potent, pain-inducing venom, well, you probably won't survive this particular interaction without some serious regret and a desperate plea for an emergency room. Yet the platypus, this furry, venomous marvel, seems entirely immune to its own potent brew. It's like a chef who can effortlessly handle ghost peppers without so much as a tear, while you're reaching for the milk and questioning all your life choices. This inherent resistance isn't just a biological parlor trick. It's a profound window into the mysteries of toxicology and, potentially, a goldmine for future medical breakthroughs. A secret handshake with immunity that we're only just beginning to decipher. Consider, for a moment, the sheer elegance of such a system. The platypus's venom is a complex symphony of peptides. Remember those GLP-1-like wonders we talked about, the ones that hint at diabetes cures. It's also packed with defensin-like peptides, DLPs and C-type natriuretic peptides, CNPs, which collectively wreak havoc on the nervous system and blood vessels of anything unlucky enough to get a dose. We're talking about a pain response that defies conventional painkillers, a lingering ache that whispers promises of eternal suffering. Yet the platypus shrugs it off. How? This isn't just about natural selection doing its thing. It's about a deeply integrated biological defense mechanism, perfected over millions of years, that allows the creature to wield its weapon without self-sabotage. One mainstream historical fact to consider in this realm of self-immunity dates back to the early 20th century, with the work on diphtheria antitoxin. Scientists like Emil von Behring and Shibasaburo Kitasato discovered that animals, after exposure to a toxin, could produce antibodies that neutralized it, providing immunity. This led to the development of serotherapy, where antibodies from an immunized animal are used to treat a human patient. While the platypus's self-resistance isn't precisely the same as producing antibodies to a bacterial toxin, the core principle of a biological system developing a defense against a harmful substance is echoed. It's a foundational concept in immunology, the body's incredible capacity to recognize and counteract threats, even those it produces itself. Now, for a quirky tidbit. Some early theories about venomous snakes being immune to their own venom included the idea that their blood was simply thicker or different in some vague, undefinable way, as if blood viscosity was the ultimate antitoxin. Of course, modern science has long since debunked such simplistic notions, but it highlights the human tendency to grasp at simple explanations for complex biological phenomena. For the platypus, the answer is far more intricate than just thick blood. though I bet their blood is perfectly adequate for all their platypus needs. It's likely a multi-pronged approach, a biological fortress against its own chemical warfare. One prevailing theory centers on the idea of specific receptor desensitization or modification. Imagine the venom's components as tiny keys and your nerve cells as locks. When the key fits, the lock turns and pain signals go screaming to your brain. For the platypus, it's possible that their locks, the receptors on their cells that would normally bind with the venom, are either subtly different, making it harder for the venom, keys to fit, or they quickly become desensitized. Think of it like trying to open a door with a key that's just slightly wrong, or a lock that just decides to take a nap after one attempt. This means the venom can't trigger the cascade of pain and inflammation it would in an envenomated human or rival platypus. Another intriguing possibility involves specialized enzymes within the platypus's own body that can rapidly degrade or neutralize the venom's active components. It's like having a dedicated cleanup crew waiting backstage to whisk away all the dangerous chemicals before they can do any harm. This internal detoxification system would be incredibly efficient, rendering the venom inert within the platypus's own tissues before it can cause any systemic damage. It's the ultimate self-cleaning oven, but for neurotoxins. Historians still argue whether the concept of self-immunity was truly understood before the advent of modern biochemistry, or if it was simply observed and attributed to some innate robustness of the animal. This open scholarly debate underscores how our understanding of biological complexity evolves with technological advancements. We can now peer into the molecular structure of venom and the genetic makeup of the platypus to uncover the precise mechanisms at play, something our predecessors could only dream of, probably while trying to figure out if hippopotamus sweat really was a natural sunscreen. Remember that little nugget. The implications of unraveling this platypus-specific venom shield are enormous. If we can identify the exact peptides, proteins, or genetic sequences responsible for this resistance, we could potentially engineer new antivenoms that aren't reliant on traditional antibody production, or even develop novel pain medications. Imagine a drug that mimics the platypus's own cellular resistance, effectively turning off the pain receptors without causing the pervasive side effects of current opioids. We're talking about a paradigm shift in pain management, moving from blunting the signal to preventing it from ever being received. It's like inventing a universal mute button for pain. Furthermore, understanding the platypus's venom resistance could provide insights into general toxicology and pharmacology. It could illuminate how other animals develop resistance to environmental toxins, or even how pathogens evade our immune systems. This single, bizarre mammal holds keys to unlocking broader biological principles, a secret decoder ring for life's chemical complexities. The very fact that a venomous creature can tolerate its own potent cocktail is a testament to the intricate and elegant solutions evolution concocts. It's a reminder that nature is always a few steps ahead of us, casually demonstrating biological feats that make our best scientific endeavors look like mere tinkering. And for the platypus, who is probably just trying to find some tasty bugs, it's just another Tuesday. The research isn't just about pain, either. If the platypus has a mechanism to disarm its own GLP, one like peptides to prevent overstimulation, that could offer even more nuanced insights for diabetes research, building upon exenotide's success. It's a cascading effect of discovery, where each answer opens a dozen new, fascinating questions. The challenge now lies in pinpointing the exact molecular choreography that allows the platypus to walk away from its own sting without so much as a flinch. A biological superpower we are eager to understand, and perhaps emulate for human benefit. The subtle genetic variations, the specific protein interactions. These are the frontiers of platypus venom research, a deep dive into the very essence of biological resilience. You're still drifting through the cool, tannin-stained waters of an Australian river, the sun dappling through eucalyptus leaves overhead. The familiar ripple of a platypus breaking the surface, its duck-like bill searching for benthic snacks, is less familiar these days, isn't it? The air feels heavier now, a sense of something precious, something profoundly unique slipping away. And if those ripples disappear forever, then the chance of unlocking platypus venom's final secrets, of finding that next diabetes cure or painkiller, well, you probably won't survive the medical implications of that loss, will you? The mystery of the platypus isn't just about its bizarre anatomy or its potent venom. It's increasingly about its very future, and how its struggle impacts our own. You see, for all its evolutionary genius, that incredible venom shield we just discussed, the platypus finds itself vulnerable in ways its ancient ancestors never imagined. It's a species now listed as near-threatened by the IUCN, a stark contrast to the historical view where, for much of the 19th and early 20th centuries, it was considered relatively abundant and even a pest in some areas, frequently hunted for its fur. This mainstream historical fact often surprises people who assume its rarity is an ancient condition. This perception of abundance, ironically, might have delayed significant conservation efforts until populations had already experienced substantial declines. You'd think an animal that lays eggs and sweats milk would get a free pass, wouldn't you? But no, humanity always finds a way. The threats are insidious, cumulative, and increasingly severe. You're talking about habitat degradation, for starters. Those pristine riverbanks, they're being eroded by agricultural runoff, cleared for urban development, or choked by invasive weeds. Your perfect platypus pad is slowly turning into a less-than-ideal swamp, or worse, a concrete drainage ditch. Then there's climate change, the big one. Australia, as you well know, has been hit by unprecedented droughts and devastating bushfires. Rivers dry up, food sources vanish, and the platypus, an animal utterly dependent on fresh water, finds its world literally shrinking. Imagine trying to find dinner when your pantry has evaporated. Not fun. This isn't just about making you feel sad for a cute, venomous mammal, though. It has direct, undeniable implications for the venom science we've been exploring. If the platypus population dwindles, if their habitats become fragmented or disappear, the availability of venom for research becomes critically limited. You can't exactly set up a large-scale platypus venom farm like you might with scorpions or snakes. They're too elusive, too sensitive, and frankly, too Australian. Collecting venom from wild platypuses is already a logistical and ethical tightrope walk, requiring permits, skilled handlers, and minimal stress to the animal. If they become rarer, this challenge amplifies exponentially. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Only the needle is a duck-billed mammal with a venomous spur, and the haystack is on fire. Consider the sheer difficulty. Current methods often involve temporary capture, careful milking of the spur, and immediate release. If the species moves closer to critically endangered status, the ethical debate around any form of intervention, even for medical research, would intensify. Conservationists and scientists might find themselves at loggerheads, with the priority shifting entirely to species preservation rather than venom extraction. This raises a fascinating, if grim, question. Can you ethically harvest a potential cure if its source is on the brink of extinction? It's a bit like asking for a blood sample from the last dodo. And it's not just about the quantity of venom. Environmental factors can influence the quality and composition of the venom itself. Scientists still argue over the precise impact of microplastics and agricultural runoff on platypus health, and by extension, the complex biochemistry of their venom. Does a platypus living in a polluted river produce the same potent pain-inducing peptides, or the same diabetes-fighting GLP-1 analogs, as one thriving in a pristine environment? It's a quirky, fringe tidbit that researchers are only just beginning to grapple with. But it highlights the intricate dance between environmental health and biomedical potential. You remember that idea about the venom having antimicrobial properties. What if those properties are weakened by environmental stressors? It's a cascade of unfortunate events, isn't it? The availability of venom isn't just a concern for initial discovery. It's crucial for ongoing research, clinical trials, and eventually, if a drug proves viable for production. If we identify a miraculous new compound tomorrow, but only have a thimbleful of the raw material because the platypuses are gone, then that discovery remains just that, a discovery, not a cure. The dream of a platypus-derived painkiller that actually works on neuropathic pain, or a super-efficient diabetes treatment, would remain just that, a dream. It's like discovering the recipe for eternal youth, but then realizing the key ingredient only grows on a plant that's now extinct. Awkward, so when you consider the future of platypus venom science, you're inextricably tied to the future of the platypus itself. Conservation efforts, protecting their river habitats, managing water resources, mitigating climate change impacts, aren't just about preserving biodiversity for its own sake. They're about safeguarding a living, breathing, venom-producing biological factory, a pharmacy with spurs. Historians still argue whether early conservation movements truly grasped the full scientific and economic potential of preserving biodiversity, beyond just aesthetic or ecological arguments. Perhaps if they had known a little duck-billed creature held a key to diabetes, the urgency might have been different from the outset. The platypus, this enigmatic creature that has defied classification and understanding for centuries, now faces its greatest test. Its survival, and with it, the potential medical breakthroughs hidden within its unique venom, depends on our ability to protect the very waters it calls home. You're standing now, not in a muddy Australian creek bed, nor in a dusty laboratory dissecting a platypus spur, but on the precipice of tomorrow. The air here hums with a different kind of energy, a quiet, almost imperceptible thrum of computational power and biological innovation. You can practically taste the sterile tang of a cleanroom, mixed with the faint, metallic scent of highly purified reagents. This isn't just about collecting tiny droplets of venom from an animal that really doesn't want to give it to you. A task, remember, that has historically involved some truly elaborate, and perhaps slightly unhinged, contraptions. No, we're talking about building venom, or at least its components, from the ground up. And let's be honest, given the complexity we've uncovered so far, you probably won't survive trying to figure out how to replicate this on your own in your garage. Imagine a world where the platypus, in all its bizarre glory, isn't strictly necessary for unlocking the secrets of its potent cocktail. Sounds like science fiction, right? But the future of venom research is already here, unfolding in labs where gene editing and synthetic biology are less about sci-fi narratives and more about precise, molecular craftsmanship. You see, the ability to manipulate genes with exquisite accuracy, perhaps most famously with tools like CRISPR-Cas9, has revolutionized biology. Think of it like this. Instead of trying to figure out how a car engine works by smashing it with a hammer and hoping for the best, you now have a hyper-precise set of tiny, molecular wrenches and screwdrivers. You can go in, snip out a specific gene, insert another, or even just tweak a single nucleotide. When it comes to venom, this means identifying the specific genes within the platypus's genome that code for its unique venom proteins and peptides. Once you've pinpointed those genetic blueprints, and that's a monumental task in itself, given the sheer complexity of venom, you can, theoretically, copy them. You're not just extracting venom. You're extracting the instructions for making venom. And what do you do with instructions? You follow them, of course, perhaps even with a few strategic modifications of your own. This leads us directly into the realm of synthetic biology, which is less about just reading the instructions and more about building a tiny biological factory. Picture a petri dish, but instead of growing bacteria that cause you misery, it's teeming with engineered microorganisms, perhaps a specific strain of yeast or bacteria that have been given those copied platypus venom genes. These microscopic workers, oblivious to their grand purpose, diligently follow their new genetic programming, churning out precise copies of the venom peptides, the very ones that cause such excruciating, inexplicable pain in humans, or perhaps the ones with tantalizing anti-diabetic properties. It's like having a miniature pharmaceutical plant, only instead of huge vats of chemicals, you've got billions of tiny, living cells doing the heavy lifting. The advantages here are enormous, especially when you consider the challenges we discussed earlier. Remember the practical difficulties and ethical considerations involved in collecting platypus venom. Trying to milk a wild platypus, even a tranquilized one, is a logistical nightmare and a potential stressor for the animal. With synthetic biology, you bypass all that. You can produce large quantities of specific venom components in a controlled environment, ensuring purity and consistency. It's a bit like comparing foraging for wild berries in a dense forest to cultivating them in a meticulously managed farm. One is unpredictable and resource-intensive. The other is efficient and scalable. Plus, you're not limited to what the platypus naturally produces. You can even create novel variants or hybrids, tweaking the molecules to enhance desired effects or remove unwanted ones. This level of precision fundamentally changes how scientists can study venom. No longer are you dealing with a murky, complex cocktail of hundreds of different compounds, trying to isolate one by one through painstaking chromatography. Now you can isolate just that GLP-1-like peptide, the one with potential diabetes-fighting properties, or just the defensin-like peptides responsible for those unique pain pathways, and study them in isolation. You can dissect their mechanisms of action with unprecedented clarity, understanding how each molecular key fits into its specific biological lock in the human body. This allows for incredibly targeted drug discovery, moving beyond the traditional trial-and-error approach. You can truly peer into the future of pharmaceutical development, where drugs are designed with exquisite specificity for their targets. Historically, the ability to synthesize complex organic molecules in the lab has been a slow, arduous process. The first total synthesis of urea by Friedrich Wörthler in 1828, which famously debunked the vitalism theory that organic compounds could only be produced by living organisms, was a monumental achievement for its time. Fast forward to today, and we're not just synthesizing simple organic molecules, but entire functional proteins and peptides that mimic nature's most intricate designs. It's a testament to how far chemistry and biology have come. And speaking of quirky tidbits, did you know some researchers are even exploring the use of protein origami, folding synthetic proteins into precise 3D structures to create novel drug candidates? It's like molecular kirigami, but instead of paper, you're using amino acid chains. And instead of a delightful little bird, you're hoping for a cure for chronic pain. However, as with all powerful technologies, there are open scholarly debates that continue to simmer beneath the surface of this innovation. Historians still argue whether the potential for designer drugs created through synthetic biology, particularly those derived from naturally occurring but now engineered compounds, raises complex ethical questions about intellectual property and equitable access. Who owns the rights to a platypus venom peptide if it was synthesized in a lab, potentially with modifications, rather than extracted from the animal itself? These are not trivial questions, as they touch upon the very foundations of pharmaceutical patents and global health equity. The promise is immense, certainly, but so too are the discussions surrounding its responsible application. This brave new world of engineered venom components holds incredible promise for treating conditions that have long stumped medical science. Imagine a targeted painkiller that specifically blocks the unique neuropathic pain caused by platypus venom, or indeed, by other conditions that mimic its persistent agony, or perhaps further refinements of those GLP-1 mimics, leading to even more effective and accessible treatments for diabetes. The possibilities stretch far beyond what we can fully grasp today, limited only by our scientific ingenuity and, of course, funding. You're no longer just observing nature's marvels. You're becoming an architect, a co-creator, in a dance with evolution. The platypus, with its ancient, perplexing venom, has given us a blueprint, and now, armed with the tools of the future, we are finally learning to read it, to understand its language, and perhaps to speak it ourselves. The mysteries aren't fully solved, not by a long shot, but the means to unravel them are becoming sharper, more precise, and frankly, a whole lot less risky than chasing a venomous monotreme through the Australian bush. You stand now on the precipice of understanding, or perhaps misunderstanding, as the final shadows stretch long across the Australian bush. The air grows cool, the rustle of leaves a soft whisper, and somewhere a platypus slips silently into the water, its flat tail propelling it through the twilight. You might think, after all we've journeyed through, that we'd have this creature's secrets all neatly filed away. But here's the reality check, my friend. You probably won't survive this complete understanding, because it simply doesn't exist yet. The platypus, in its infinite, adorable, venomous wisdom, still holds so much back. We've delved deep into the paradox of its existence, from the initial European bewilderment that branded it, a hoax, remember that initial global eye roll, to the unsettling discovery of its male's potent ankle spur. That spur, we know, delivers a pain unlike almost anything else, a persistent, burning, swelling agony that doctors still struggle to truly alleviate. This is the first, and perhaps most frustrating, of its enduring enigmas. Why such an extreme, non-lethal, yet utterly debilitating pain? Conventional painkillers often shrug their shoulders at it, leaving you feeling like you've been personally insulted by a tiny, aquatic mammal. Scientists continue to debate whether this unique neuropathic signature is a bizarre evolutionary fluke, or a highly specific deterrent perfected over millions of years, designed purely for male-on-male combat during breeding season. A sort of highly effective, biological, stay-out-of-my-swamp sign. Then there's the evolutionary puzzle itself. Why did this egg-laying, duck-billed, beaver-tailed marvel develop venom in the first place? It's not for hunting. They feast on invertebrates. It's almost certainly not for defense against predators, as a quick zap from a spur isn't going to stop a hungry dingo. This is a mainstream historical fact that's often overlooked in biology textbooks, the sheer rarity of a venomous mammal. Aside from a few shrews and solenodons, it's virtually unheard of. This puts the platypus in a very exclusive and very confusing club. Historians still argue whether this unique trait developed independently or is a relic of an ancient, more widely venomous mammalian ancestor, a genetic whisper from a time long past. It's like finding out your sweet, elderly grandma secretly has a black belt in karate, completely unexpected, and you just know there's a story there you're not getting. And how does the platypus itself escape its own potent brew? We touched on its internal venom shield, but the exact molecular mechanisms that grant it immunity remain largely undefined. It's a bit like having a chef who can cook with the spiciest peppers on earth and never feel the burn, while you're left chugging milk after a single bite. This quirky tidbit about self-immunity opens up fascinating avenues for research, not just into how animals tolerate their own toxins, but also potentially into novel drug delivery systems or pain management techniques for humans. If we could bottle that platypus nope to pain, imagine the possibilities. Yet, amidst these persistent mysteries lies immense medical promise. Remember our journey into the GLP-1 peptide. That's where the platypus truly stepped out of the Natural History Museum and into the pharmacy. The discovery that a peptide in its venom mimicked a gut hormone led directly to the development of exenatide, a groundbreaking drug for type 2 diabetes. That single breakthrough has illuminated the vast, unexplored pharmaceutical potential hidden within this peculiar creature's chemical cocktail. It's not just diabetes either. Researchers are still sifting through the venom's components, finding hints of antimicrobial properties that could combat antibiotic-resistant superbugs, or even anti-cancer potential, turning a creature that causes agony into a harbinger of healing. Imagine a platypus saving humanity from a future plague, a truly fitting, if slightly absurd, superhero. The quest for answers continues, a relentless pursuit by scientists around the globe. The collection challenge remains formidable. Those spurs are not exactly user-friendly, and platypuses are shy. Ethical considerations of bioprospecting also linger, ensuring that the benefits derived from nature's pharmacy are shared equitably. Looking to the future, as we discussed, new frontiers like gene editing and synthetic biology promise to revolutionize venom research. Instead of painstakingly milking a platypus, which, let's be honest, sounds like a job description that would require a very specific, and probably slightly unhinged, personality, we might one day be able to synthesize its venom components in a lab, unlocking their secrets without disturbing a single furry, venomous foot. The platypus, in its quiet, unassuming way, reminds us that the greatest medical breakthroughs often hide in the most unexpected corners of the natural world, waiting for curious minds to finally, patiently, unravel their lasting enigma. As the final words of our journey softly settle, you find yourself drifting, much like the platypus drifts through its cool, dark waters at dusk. The questions linger, yes. The mysteries of the venom still echo in the quiet chambers of scientific thought, but there's a gentle reassurance in that. For in the unknown, there is always room for discovery, a silent promise of new wonders waiting just beyond the horizon of our current understanding. Imagine the gentle rhythm of the night, the soft murmur of the world as it prepares for slumber. Let the vivid images of the platypus, its unique spur, its ancient lineage, begin to soften, to blur at the edges, transforming into the hazy, comforting patterns that precede a deep and restful sleep. The sharp edge of pain, the urgency of scientific inquiry, all recede now, replaced by a profound sense of peace. Feel your breath slow, even and deep, a gentle tide rising and falling within you. The complexities of peptides and evolution, of medical breakthroughs and ethical debates, now whisper away like the last embers of a dying fire, leaving behind only warmth and quiet. You have journeyed far, absorbed much, and now it is time to release it all, to let your mind settle into the tranquil depths of rest. Allow yourself to be carried effortlessly by the soft current of this quiet night, knowing that some enigmas are meant to simply be, to inspire and to comfort in their enduring mystery. Let all thoughts dissolve, fading into the soft, comforting darkness. Sweet dreams,